Chapter 494. In the wilderness in October, there was only the word chaos. Disputes arose everywhere. Warlords divided themselves, and smoke filled the air. Whether it was the lords or the natives, they were all prepared to go all out before winter arrived. The victor was king, and the loser was a bandit. Within the wilderness, everywhere was filled with an austere killing intent. As the saying went, when the heavens released killing intent, the stars would shift. When the earth released killing intent, dragons and snakes would rise. When humans released killing intent, the earth would turn upside down. When humans released killing intent, even the heavens and earth would change color. Formless killing intent burst forth from everywhere, like streaks of red sword energy that shot into the sky. Countless killing intents converged in the sky, fusing and colliding. Even the clouds in the sky changed color. Blood-colored clouds covered the sky of the wilderness, an ominous sign. In a certain place in the wilderness, the representative of the school of Yin-Yang, Feng-Yin, looked at the red clouds above his head, speechless. Such a heavenly phenomenon was rare even during the war-torn Warring States period. As an outstanding figure of the school of Yin-Yang, Feng-Yin saw more than ordinary people. He looked carefully, and it was as if he could see through tens of thousands of miles. In the sky, there was a large dragon in the north, central plains, and south. Among them, the giant dragon in the south had the most blood energy, the strongest killing intent, and the most dazzling. Around each large dragon, there were several, or even more than 10 small dragons coiled around it. This was the pattern of the battle for dragons. The dragons condensed from clouds represented the manifestation of providence. It was the providence of the territory, and also the Lord's providence. Providence rose and took form. Apart from dragons, there were also some other ferocious beasts and auspicious beasts in the sky, where the blood-red clouds covered. There were phoenixes, icebergs, black bears, tigers, leopards, and even black snakes. The form of providence represented the will of the Lord. At the end of the second year of Gaia, even Ouyang Shua couldn't truly manifest providence. The reason why it appeared early was because of this rare killing intent. Once the killing intent disappeared, the form of providence would once again disappear. Thus, this was the best time for the school of Yin-Yang to observe the providence of the Lord. If it were anyone else, they would see nothing but red clouds when they looked up. The world of great competition is also a world of great chaos. Fan Yin muttered to himself as he vanished into the boundless wilderness, and his figure seemed to be slightly sluggish. Perhaps he didn't choose to become an official in Shanghai City because he didn't want to be embroiled in this world's disputes. A person's killing intent was emitted by a person, and it would also affect other people. In the wilderness, all the soldiers in the army were affected by the blood-red clouds in the sky, and traces of bloodlust appeared in their eyes. All of them were brimming with battle intent and killing intent. The burst of killing intent once again converged into the sky. The two of them worked together, causing the red clouds in the sky to grow increasingly brighter. The bright red color caused people to prostrate themselves in worship because it was the color of imperial power. Within the wilderness, thousands of lords were no longer willing to remain dormant. Even the vegetation couldn't endure this wave of killing intent. The weeds withered ahead of time, and leaves flew everywhere, filling the sky. From the north to the south, the entire wilderness seemed to have entered winter in advance. There was no sign of life at all. The redness of the sky and the withered yellow of the ground complemented each other, forming a rare scene in the human world. This year's winter came especially early, and it was especially cold. After the midwinter, who would survive and who would be buried in the wilderness, everything was unknown. Even Gaia, who planned everything, could only be a silent bystander at this moment, with the world as the chessboard and the lives of the people as chess pieces. The chessboard had already been set, and everyone in the world was a chess piece. No one could change the direction of the chessboard alone. There was no longer an inch of peaceful land in the entire China region. Anyone who tried to live a peaceful life would eventually be eliminated. Only by throwing themselves into the surging blood-red tide would they be able to win a chance of survival. This was because the surging, killing intent that filled the world had to find an outlet. The Central Plains region was the first to erupt. Chunsheng Zhang Chu and Xiangyu's West Chu formed an alliance to resist the alliance of the five lords in the surrounding five provinces. After half a month of preparation, this unprecedented war finally broke out. The heroes were vying for supremacy in the Central Plains. The first to rise in revolt was the alliance of 100,000 led by Piaolinghuan. The army of 100,000 broke through the western border of the Central Plains province, and along the way, they seized cities and seized territory. Jiangchu's capital, Chun County, was located in the east of the Central Plains province. The western side had always been the weakest area of defense. Thus, Piaolinghuan's army did not encounter much resistance in the early stages, and they advanced triumphantly. Piaolinghuan's victory naturally stimulated the restlessness of the others. Once this person moved, the entire army moved together. It was as if some mechanism had been triggered, and the enormous war machine was completely activated. Following closely behind Piaolinghuan, Lord Chunshen led the alliance of 180,000 soldiers to break through from the south of the Central Plains province. The moment they entered, they directly attacked the central hinterland of Jiangchu. The two armies were like a pair of scissors, firmly piercing the heart of Jiangchu's regime. Only Feng Qiuhuang's army of 150,000 temporarily did not move and was stationed at the border. The royal city, Luoyang, was next to Taiyuan province, where Luo Feng City was located. Thus, in the north, Jiangchu's regime did not have a strong foundation due to the existence of Luoyang, and thus did not pose much of a threat to Taiyuan province. At the same time, even if Feng Qiuhuang and the other lords of Taiyuan province occupied the northern part of the Central Plains province, they would not be able to operate in peace due to the existence of Luoyang. Don't forget that the next battle would take place in the Han Dynasty. If there were no accidents, Chang would definitely be left behind by Gaia for the Tang Dynasty. In that case, Luoyang would be the land of the Han Dynasty. Thus, Ouyang Shua sent two proverbs to Feng Qiuhuang. If the enemy does not move, I will not move. If the enemy moves, then strike like a thunderbolt. Ouyang Shua believed that with Feng Qiuhuang's intelligence, he would definitely understand the deeper meaning of his words. When the alliance army attacked, Chunsheng was not easy to deal with. Otherwise, Chunsheng would not have been able to lead his troops to conquer the entire Central Plains province in a short period of half a year. Under Chunsheng's command, other than the old General Xiang Yin who rushed over as reinforcements, there were a few other generals. They were Wu Guang, Wu Chun, Zhang Er, and Chen Yu. Wu Chun and the other two were the fuse for the Battle of Giant Deer. Apart from them, the 600,000 soldiers of Jiangchu's regime were not to be trifled with. After ascertaining the enemy's situation, Chunsheng immediately began to deploy his troops. He ordered Great General Xiang Yin to lead 200,000 soldiers to the south to attack Lord Chunshen's army. Wu Guang personally led 150,000 soldiers to face wandering Illusori's army in the west. Zhang Er led 200,000 soldiers to the vast northern border of the Central Plains province to guard against Feng Qiuhuang's army and Di Chen's army that could come south at any time. The capital city, Chun County, only had 50,000 soldiers garrisoned under Chun Yu's command. In this battle, Chunsheng also won a fight with all his might. If he won this battle, he would be able to win precious breathing space for the newly established Jiangchu's regime. For the entire winter, Chunsheng could calmly digest the newly conquered land. In the coming year, Jiangchu's regime would no longer be afraid of any challenges. Of course, if he failed, then there would be no need to mention anything. Chunsheng, who had been reborn, would not tolerate living an ignoble life again. The war that broke out in the Central Plains became the fuse that ignited the entire World War. Immediately after the Central Plains, the southeast region also ignited the flames of war. Huang Chao was full of ambition, Wolf Warrior and the others also had hearts as firm as steel. In the second year of Gaia, only one side could survive. Wolf Warrior once again gathered 100,000 soldiers and broke into the northern part of Hunan province, preparing to sweep through from north to south. Of course, Wolf Warrior's army carefully split open West Chu's territory. For the time being, Wolf Warrior and the other lords did not dare to provoke this overlord, lest they cause trouble. To be honest, when Peng City arrived in the wilderness, Wolf Warrior was the most depressed. His blood-red city was only a few hundred kilometers away from Peng City. With such a neighbor, no one would not be able to sleep soundly. As the saying went, how could one allow others to sleep beside one's bed? Sooner or later, there would be a war between West Chu and Blood-Red City. But now is not the time. Wolf Warrior was very clear that the most important thing right now was to eliminate Huang Chao's army. Otherwise, if Huang Chao and Xiang Yu joined forces again, the consequences would be unimaginable. Similarly, Xiang Yu was not in the mood to attack Blood-Red City at this time. West Chu's first strategic goal was to go north and completely occupy Ludong province. It was precisely because they saw through Xiang Yu's intention that the lords of Ludong province huddled together in fear. At this moment, they had already formed an army of more than 200,000. Between the two, there was bound to be a war. It was just that they did not know when this war would break out and whether it would affect the war in Zhongyuan province. In the southeast region, apart from Wolf Warrior, Xiongba was also an active member. At the same time that Wolf Warrior sent out his army, Xiongba led 150,000 troops from south to north, sweeping all the way. The two armies attacked Huang Chao's army from the front and back. At this moment, the 80,000 troops led by the Siege Lion were arrayed in the south of Hunan province. They were in a somewhat awkward situation, as if this war had nothing to do with them. It had to be said that under such circumstances, the advantage of the big families was undoubtedly revealed. Whether it was the connections or the ability to unite and communicate, it was not something that the Siege Lion and the others could compare with. Otherwise, Baihua would not be in the awkward situation of having no allies to support him in Yunnan province. Of course, there was another important reason why the lords of Yunnan province were not willing to send troops to attack the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, and that was the existence of Shanghai City. Everyone knew that Shanghai City was extremely aggressive. Not to mention Chuanan province, even the neighboring Lingnan province had been cut in half by Shanghai City. Therefore, how could Shanghai City allow others to encroach on Chuanan province? From her point of view, attacking the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom was just a gift for Shanghai City. They were powerless to snatch food from the tiger's mouth and occupy the 3 counties of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom as their own. Since that was the case, why not watch from the sidelines? As the saying goes, sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Let Shanghai City and Lingxi City fight to the death with the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. In fact, this was indeed the case. Lingxi City was almost forced to a dead end. To be continued. Chapter 495. Ouyang Shual was temporarily unable to do anything about Lingxi City's predicament. At this moment, Ouyang Shual wasn't in the mood to pay attention to what was happening outside the battlefield. Because Chio's army of 100,000 had appeared 10 kilometers away from Shanghai City's army command center, and they'd set up camp. Even an infantryman would need at most 2 hours to cross a distance of 20 li. As for the light cavalry, it would only take half an hour to break into the enemy's camp. In other words, at this distance, the two sides could start fighting at any time. The true battle between the two sides had officially begun. Han Xian began to arrange his troops. Zhang Han was appointed as the general of the left, and he would lead the 1st and 4th divisions of the Leopard Corps on the left wing. Di Qing was appointed as the general of the right, and he would lead the 3rd and 5th divisions of the Leopard Corps on the right wing. Han Xian presided over the Central Army, leading the Leopard Legion's 2nd Division. The Imperial Guard Division was temporarily placed under Han Xian's command as the main force of the army. Ouyang Shual, on the other hand, commanded 3,000 Shenwu guards as the reserve force of the army. He personally guarded the rear. More than 80,000 soldiers spread out at the border, stretching for several miles. As early as 2 days ago, The Sure Wanshui Division and the Mountain Pillar Division had already received military orders from Han Xin, requesting them to immediately break camp and set out. They were to hide during the day and move out at night, avoiding the scouts of Wuzhou County and charging towards the rear of Qiu's army. Han Xin did not intend to raid Qiu City. As long as Qiu existed, Qiu City would be Qiu City. Without Qiu, Qiu City was an empty city. Therefore, raiding his lair was completely useless against Qiu. As long as the war broke out, regardless of whether Qiu City fell or not, Qiu would lead the army and march forward bravely. In other words, as long as they defeated the 100,000 Qiu army, Wuzhou County would be settled in one battle. This was a simple arithmetic problem. It was precisely because Han Xin had seen through this that he decided to gather all his forces to annihilate Qiu's army. What was Qiu doing at this moment? It was high ground. The mountain was less than 100 meters high, and Qiu's tent was stationed at the top of the mountain. Later generations named this highland Demon King's Slope, meaning the place where the great Demon King Qiu was stationed. Although the mountain was not high, the forest was lush. What was especially rare was that there was a large area of osmanthus trees growing on the top of the mountain. The golden October was the season when the osmanthus flowers were in full bloom. Unfortunately, the desolate wilderness completely destroyed this beautiful scenery. The osmanthus trees on the mountain seemed to have suddenly withered overnight. The osmanthus flowers that had just bloomed fell from the branches and covered the ground. After being repeatedly trampled by the barbarian warriors, it became even more dilapidated. Scattered into mud and crushed into dust, only the fragrance remained. The autumn wind blew past, and the air was mixed with the fragrance of osmanthus. It seemed to be somewhat incompatible with the desolate atmosphere that filled the wilderness. Perhaps this was the reason why Qiu chose to station here. In the eyes of the outside world, mountain barbarians were synonymous with uncivilized people. The leader of the mountain barbarians, Qiu, was naturally the embodiment of vulgarity, ignorance, evil, and ugliness. The great Demon King. The people of the Central Plains feared him, but they would never worship him. And all of this was just prejudice, a misunderstanding. At the very least, Ouyang Shua didn't think so. As one of the few suzerains who had interacted with the mountain barbarians, Ouyang Shua had never thought that the mountain barbarians were an ignorant and uncivilized race. Because there were too many outstanding people among the mountain barbarians. Whether it was the mystic bird tribe's great shaman's wisdom, or the mountain barbarian warriors Shi Bao, and Lei Jingtian's bravery, they all left a deep impression on Ouyang Shua. Not to mention, the Thunder and Lightning tribe's chief, Lei Fan, relied on his own strength to rise to the position of Duanren Prefecture's magistrate. Whether it was civil or military, the mountain barbarians could handle both. Different from the Central Plains' craftiness, the mountain barbarians were simple and honest, more loyal and reliable. Therefore, as the barbarian tribe's spiritual leader, how could Qiu be a vulgar person? As early as the ancient times, the tribe led by Qiu was already ahead of the world in terms of technology. This was enough to prove that Qiu was an astute person. Otherwise, Qiu would not have been able to conquer such a large territory and become a powerful force that could not be ignored in the wilderness. The Yellow Emperor and Flame Emperor, who were his contemporaries, had disappeared without a trace. Of course, astute did not mean benevolence. Qiu's cruelty was also an indisputable fact. The mountain barbarian warriors stationed on the hillside exuded a terrifying bloody aura. These guards were the elites that Qiu had personally trained, known as the Qiu Blood Guards. Compared to the Han warriors, the mountain barbarian warriors were much taller. What was strange was that the Qiu Blood Guards were even taller than the ordinary barbarian warriors. Each of them was more than 2 meters tall. His sturdy muscles bulged, full of explosive power. What was even more strange was that the Qiu Blood Guards' eyes were blood red. Even in the dark of the night, their eyes would emit rays of red light, looking extremely terrifying. This was also the origin of the name Qiu Blood Guards. Every blood guard was a standard human-shaped killing machine. They had no emotions, no pain, only killing. The training of the blood guards was Chi Yu's top secret. Even in Chi Yu's city, few people knew about it. In the city, Chi Yu had specially built an enclosed courtyard for the training of the blood guards. The courtyard's walls were tall, isolating the outside world from the outside world. The commoners in the city could hear the screams coming from the courtyard even from far away. Pain and hysteria, like the roars of wild beasts, despair and sorrow. No one knew what kind of pain the soldiers who were sent to the courtyard were suffering. Every day, corpses were carried out from the back door of the courtyard and hurriedly sent to the cemetery for burial. Even the corpses were covered with linen, making it difficult for outsiders to see their true faces. After a long time, some secrets were no longer secrets. Finally, someone accidentally saw the face of the corpse in the cemetery. It was said that the mountain barbarian was so frightened that he went into shock on the spot and almost died. A devil from hell. It was reported that the corpse that was carried out had a blurred face, blood vessels all over its body, and blood was flowing out of its 7 orifices. It was simply a man of blood. No one knew what kind of secret technique Chi Yu was using to train these blood guards. In addition, people even saw large numbers of Han people being escorted into the courtyard from time to time. These innocent people were never seen walking out of the courtyard again. Even when the war was about to start and the courtyard was completely closed, no one saw them come out. After a long period of training, even Chi Yu himself became violent. Chi Yu's eyes, like those of the blood guards, turned completely red and translucent. In a year and a half, tens of thousands of mountain barbarians were sent to the courtyard for training. In the end, only 1,000 blood guard were successfully trained by Chi Yu. The remaining 9,000 mountain barbarian soldiers were all turned into cold corpses and slept in the cemetery. If it was not for Chi Yu's high prestige among the mountain barbarians, as if he was the incarnation of God, such a large proportion of casualties would have caused a backlash and dissatisfaction among the various tribes. One had to understand that the mountain barbarian soldiers who were sent for training were all carefully selected, the elites among the elites of the various tribes. Such a large number of casualties was really shocking. The soldiers who had gone through hellish training could no longer be tolerated in the world. Therefore, the moment the Chi Yu blood guards transformed, they completely lost their individual consciousness. They no longer knew their past, no longer knew their relatives, and even no longer had feelings. What was left was only obedience and killing. They obeyed their master, Chi Yu, and killed all enemies in front of them. These 1,000 Chi Yu blood guards were the greatest trump card of the demon god Chi Yu. Other than that, there was also Chi Yu's transformation of the soldiers of the various tribes. Chi Yu City was formed by the gathering of countless mountain barbarian tribes. From the beginning, it was a tribal alliance. Chi Yu is the leader of the tribal alliance, or rather, the common leader. In history, Chi Yu's army was also formed in this way. It was rumored that Chi Yu had 81 brothers, but in reality, it was an alliance of 81 tribes. In the Battle of Zhuolu, Chi Yu suffered a crushing defeat. Therefore, after being reborn in the wilderness, Chi Yu learned the lessons of his previous life. He was an extremely intelligent person, and he immediately understood the way a lord used troops in the wilderness. Chi Yu ordered the soldiers of the various tribes to be gathered together and then reorganized. In the end, according to the organization of the wilderness, Chi Yu formed 10 10,000-man teams. Each 10,000-man team was divided into 10,000-man teams, and so on, until it was a 10-man team. The organization of Chi Yu's army was somewhat similar to the grassland army. The advantage of this kind of organization was that it was simple, easy to understand, and did not have high requirements for the commander. Just this point alone showed how astute Chi Yu was and how he could apply what he learned. After the reorganization of the army, the 100,000-man army could truly work together and would no longer be hindered by the various tribal leaders. Chi Yu's absolute authority in the army would be established. Besides this, Chi Yu also appointed a dozen of his brothers to be the leaders of the 10,000-man teams. In this way, Chi Yu had the army firmly in his hands. His dozen or so brothers had gone through life and death with him, and were absolutely loyal to Chiyu. The various tribes had completely lost their right to speak in the army. Other than the organization of the army, Chiyu also placed great importance on the development of weapons and equipment. In history, the bronze weapons used by Chiyu's army were superior to the stone weapons used by the Yanhuang army. Although they did not win the war, the advantage of weapons was undeniably evident. Therefore, in the wilderness, Chiyu naturally placed great importance on weapons and equipment. He used the craftsmen of the Han in the wilderness, combined with the secret techniques of the Zhuli tribe, to develop unique weapons and armor. Although these weapons and equipment could not compare to the radiant armor and Tang saber, which are the best in history, they were much better than the weapons and equipment given by the system. Therefore, even in terms of weapons and equipment, the army of Shanghai City could not have too much of an advantage. These 3 points were where Chiyu's confidence came from. Chiyu was confident that he could defeat the enemy before him and enter Lingnan province in one fell swoop. To be continued. Chapter 496. The morning sun shone through the thick red clouds, bringing with it rays of red light, bewitching and bloodthirsty. In the wilderness, withered yellow weeds were covered in morning dew. Under the illumination of the red sunlight, speckles of red light were reflected on the weeds. Cold and beautiful, this scene was like returning to the primeval times. Bang, 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 accompanied by the drumming of the wilderness, the 100,000-strong mountain barbarian army moved out. In army formation, there were dozens of large drums made of cowhide. Desolate beasts pulled the chariots, and strong men beat the drums. Every drum was as large as a millstone, with excellent workmanship. Only a strong man could beat it. 10,000-strong troops lined up, stretching for several li, covering the sky. The soldiers stepped on the drums, marching a uniform pace, causing the earth to tremble, the mountains to collapse, and the rivers to stop flowing. The mountain barbarian army was made up entirely of infantry, mainly saber and axemen, making up more than 70%. This was because sabers and axes were the weapons that demon god Chi-Yu was best at. Influenced by Chi-Yu, the mountain barbarian soldiers' favorite weapons were also these two. Sabers were large sabers, axes were giant axes. Whether it was sabers or battle axes, they were all heavy, hard, and filled with a strong wilderness color. Other than the sabers and axemen, there were also a few archers and spear throwers in the army formation. Whether it was the sabers and axemen, archers, or spear throwers, they all wore iron armor. To the mountain barbarian soldiers, leather armor was beneath their notice. 20 kilograms of iron armor was as light as a feather when worn by the mountain barbarian soldiers. The iron armor was ferocious in shape, carved with pictures of giant wild beasts, most of which had long gone extinct. Under the reflection of the red light, the black iron armor reflected rays of cold light. Because of the scarcity of iron ore and the lack of craftsmen, the iron armor of the soldiers did not cover the entire body. It could only protect the joints, head, chest, and other key parts. The other parts were directly exposed to the air. The bulging muscles showed pure strength and beauty. This was an army that had come from the wildlands. They were the embodiment of the wildlands' unbridled, domineering, and straightforward killing. Simple and direct. Accompanied by the beating of the war drums, the warriors struck their weapons and sang the battle song of the wilderness. The king gave his command and beat the drum. Build my weapons and armor, fight in all directions. Kill your way to the top of the 9 heavens and shed your blood. My head and body are separated, and I have no regrets even in death. Wang Shi, I'm going. The lyrics were simple, with only a few repetitive lines. The meaning expressed was also very concise. It was saying that the great demon King Chi-Yu had summoned the warriors to battle and shed their blood. The desolate battle song reverberated in the wilderness, soaring to the heavens. Even Ouyang Shuo, who was 10 miles away, could faintly feel the wild aura coming from the front. Among the vast army, Chi-Yu's carriage was the most eye-catching. The entire frame of the carriage was 10 meters tall, like a moving city tower, towering majestically. The carriage was pulled by a total of 20 dire beasts, moving slowly in the middle of the army. 1,000 Chiyu blood guards stood guard around the chariot like the most loyal guards. Chiyu stood at the top of the carriage with a giant axe in his hand, wearing the same sinister armor and a red cape. He was like a demon god patrolling the vast wilderness. It was as if, at this moment, he was the supreme king of this land. As the army advanced, its momentum became stronger and stronger. Whether it was the sound of the war drums or the battle song, every syllable seemed to be filled with a magical power, stimulating the hot blood of the barbarian warriors and making them boil. Their morale soared. When the two armies fought, the momentum of the entire army would reach its peak. The murderous aura would pour down and turn the enemies into powder. The secret of the wilderness was far from being as simple as it seemed on the surface. At the very least, among the lords, no one knew the secret contained in these seemingly ordinary syllables. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the army of 100,000 barbarians slowly appeared on the horizon. The black tide of people first appeared bit by bit, like a black line. Then, the black line began to spread and stretch, forming a black tide. The black tide covered the withered yellow earth. As far as the eye could see, it was as if there was only black left between heaven and earth. Pure black, oppressive black. The black tide surged and finally completely crossed the horizon, slowly unfolding in the wilderness, forming a black formation that was several miles wide and thousands of meters long. Banners were waving, and axes were standing in great numbers. In front of them, the army of Shanghai City had already been waiting for a long time. In front of the Central Army, the Imperial Guard Division, led by Lin Yi, was at the forefront of the formation. The golden light of the radiant armor was the symbol of Shanghai City. In this battle, Ouyang Shuo was not stingy with the Imperial Guard Division. They would be the sharp blade of the Central Army. As soon as the battle began, they would be drawn and pierced through the enemy. Ouyang Shuo was also standing on the high command platform, looking ahead. With his eyesight, he could already clearly see the faces of the barbarian warriors opposite him. Their eyes were all red. He raised his head and looked at Chiyu from afar. Compared to the Battle of Zhuolu, the current Chiyu seemed to have become even more powerful. His body was surging with blood energy. Affected by this, the demon god bloodline in Ouyang Shuo's body was somewhat restless. Ouyang Shuo was shocked. He hurriedly used the inner cannon of the Yellow Arch to suppress the restlessness of the bloodline in his body. Speaking of which, his demon god bloodline came from Chiyu. The two of them had the same bloodline. However, compared to Chiyu, Ouyang Shuo's bloodline was much weaker. One was the original, while the other was a pirated version. As if sensing Ouyang Shuo's gaze, Chiyu suddenly turned his head and glanced at Ouyang Shuo. His eyes were calm and emotionless. It was as if he was looking at a king. With just a glance, Chiyu turned his head again. Ouyang Shuo's heart trembled. It was as if he'd been pierced by something invisible. His eyes burned. Chiyu had already become so powerful. Ouyang Shuo's expression was solemn. Compared to the Battle of Zhuolu, his strength had increased by more than 2 or 3 times. It was like a rocket that was getting stronger by the day. With his current strength, he would even be able to put up a fight against a martial emperor. Even so, Ouyang Shuo was still unable to see through Chiyu's strength. This could only mean that the gap between the two of them was not just a little bit. It was a huge gap between their cultivation levels. Was the demon god Chiyu really so powerful? Ouyang Shuo sighed inwardly. Chiyu's individual strength was definitely an unstable factor in this battle. In addition, what attracted Ouyang Shuo's attention were the warriors around Chiyu's carriage. They were the Chiyu blood guards. Although Ouyang Shuo did not know their names, he could feel the faint blood aura, killing intent, and hostility emanating from these warriors. Ever since he started practicing the killer sword, Ouyang Shuo had become more sensitive to killing intent. These strange warriors could not escape Ouyang Shuo's perception at all. It was another surprise. Ouyang Shuo could feel that the blood aura in these warriors was even stronger than the divine martial guards. Or the divine martial guards. They were the warriors of River East who had defeated Xiangyu and obtained the name Gaia bestowed upon them. Even so, they were still inferior. What kind of monsters did the great demon king, Qi Yu, cultivate? Ouyang Shuo could even vaguely feel that the blood aura of these special warriors was faintly resonating with the blood aura in Qi Yu's body. It was as if Qi Yu's body was the source of all the blood aura. Qi Yu and the warriors he nurtured seemed to be one entity. This feeling was really strange. As far as Ouyang Shuo knew, no one in his previous life had such individual strength. Didn't this game emphasize teamwork? How much did Gaia push Qi Yu's strength system to? Or in other words, how many more secrets did Ouyang Shuo not know about this game in his previous life? At this moment, Ouyang Shuo was no longer as confident about his knowledge of his previous life. As the saying went, the higher one stood, the further one could see. In his previous life, Ouyang Shuo was really too weak. He was so weak that he could not see the true face of the world. It was only at this moment that the truth of the world slowly unfolded in front of Ouyang Shuo. Always have a heart of reverence. Ouyang Shuo suddenly remembered the advice given to him by an old man in his previous life. Reverence? Ouyang Shuo stared at the mountain barbarian army in the distance and suddenly fell silent. Sitting next to Ouyang Shuo was the commander of this battle, Han Xian. Han Xian was a purely commanding general. His personal martial arts skills were not outstanding and could even be considered mediocre. Therefore, Han Xian did not notice Ouyang Shuo's strangeness. What he saw was different from what Ouyang Shuo saw. What Han Xian saw was the enemy's formation, weapons, equipment, and morale. In Han Xian's eyes, the formation of the mountain barbarians could only be described as clumsy. Even a commander who had just graduated from the army's martial arts lecture hall did better than them. The mountain barbarians' army did not have many types of soldiers to begin with, and their formation was messy. When they formed a formation, it was like a 10,000-man team, connected by another 10,000-man team. There was no order to speak of. When the real battle started, those captains would probably not be able to command the troops in the battle at all, apart from leading the charge. Swarming to the ground was the mountain barbarians' only choice. On the other hand, the army of Shanghai City already had professional commanders and generals. Coupled with the perfect command flag system and herald system, Han Xian would be able to command the army as if it were his own arm. Han Xian had grasped the key to victory in this battle. At the same time, the enemy's weapons, equipment, and morale made Han Xian's heart heavy. In history, it was not unheard of for barbarian civilizations to defeat or even conquer agricultural civilizations through brute force. What they relied on was absolute violence and indomitable morale. The mountain barbarian army, on the other side, had both. Han Xian knew that the leopard army under his command had just been reorganized from the prisoners of war. Their morale was at its lowest, and the soldiers' recognition of Shanghai City had not been fully formed. In terms of morale, the army of Shanghai City was much weaker. This was going to be a tough battle. Han Xian thought of the marquee prediction, and his expression turned solemn. To be continued. Chapter 497. P.S. I wish everyone a Happy New Year in advance. Sheng Xiao specially asked someone to make an electronic map of the China region and shared it in the book group. It is a New Year gift from Sheng Xiao to everyone. Those who are interested can go take a look. Group number 5715-42584. Woo! Almost at the same time, both sides blew their horns to attack. The distant and powerful horn sound was like a starting gun. In an instant, the entire battlefield changed from silence to extreme movement. The army in formation, under the leadership of the officer, waved their weapons, roared, and charged towards the enemy. Even the red clouds in the sky suddenly became much thicker, and the killing intent was strong. If the school of Yinyang was here, they would definitely see in the clouds a few miles long dragon, roaring. Opposite the dragon was a black demon god. Two spiritual bodies, facing each other. The red clouds were their battlefield, and the providence was their food. This was a battle of luck. Whoever lost would be swallowed up. On the battlefield, the first to attack was the Praetorian Guard. In the center of the battlefield, Lin E led the Praetorian Guard, like a group of wild horses, charging towards the enemy at high speed. "Rise!" Lin E shouted. With a swoosh, the well-trained cavalrymen raised their huge lances in unison. In an instant, they formed the horse meat mincing formation. The sharp ends of the lances emitted waves of cold light. Even the bravest barbarian warriors, without the double defense of heavy armor and giant shields, could not stop the Praetorian Guard, a light cavalry division's charge. Originally, the Praetorian Guard should be classified as a heavy cavalry division. But the cyan beetle horses were too domineering, and the Praetorian Guard's cyan beetle horses were even more elite. The elite cyan beetle horses, even with iron armor, could still launch a fast charge. Thus, the current Praetorian Guard could only be called a light cavalry division. They had the agility of a light cavalry and the strength of a heavy cavalry. It was truly a nightmare for all enemies. The order Lin E received was to lead the Praetorian Guards to completely disrupt the enemy's formation and destroy their command system. They wouldn't be able to take care of the front and the back, nor would they be able to coordinate their left and right. The mountain barbarian army did not know how to arrange their troops, so Han Exine might as well go all out. He wanted to destroy the mountain barbarians' command system in one fell swoop, forcing them to fight on their own. Only in this way could the Leopard Tau Corps that followed be able to obtain victory in the chaos. Han Exine's strategy was to replace defense with offense and seize the initiative. If one were to look down from above, one would be able to clearly see that the Imperial Guard Regiment was like a golden torrent, rampaging through the vast army of the barbarian mountain army, forcefully carving out a bloody path in the army of tens of thousands. There wasn't a single troop that could stop the Imperial Guard Division from advancing. No one could. Even if Chi Yu sent his blood guards, it would be of no use. The high-speed charging cavalry could trample any enemy in front of them into meat paste, turning them into powder. Other than that, the training of the Imperial Guard Division was also the key to victory. The Imperial Guard Division that initiated the charge was closely linked to the front and back, as if they were a single entity. They could skillfully switch the vanguard at the front when they made a turn. This way, they could take turns to advance, not running out of energy. This kind of art of changing formations could not be achieved without long and arduous training. During a cavalry charge, the leading horse was the most important and also the most tiring. Facing tens of thousands of mountain barbarian soldiers, they needed the most fearless courage, charging without fear of death. Every time, the one in charge of the front was either the brigade marshal or Lin E. The Imperial Guard Division never lacked good men like this, because they were the trump card of Shanghai City, the sharp sword of the territory. Their general was given the name Tiger Might. Looking from above, one could clearly see that the Imperial Guard Division was the first to charge in a straight line, and when they broke into the enemy's formation, they suddenly turned left, moving horizontally, knocking away the mountain barbarian soldiers who had just started running. The cavalry kept changing directions, left or right, front or back, making it difficult for the enemy to predict. More than 10,000 cavalrymen galloped through the army of 100,000. The only thing they could avoid was Chi Yu's chariot. Lin E wanted to kill Chi Yu, but he was afraid of disobeying military orders and being punished. Chi Yu was the soul of the enemy, after all, and the barbarian soldiers would probably go crazy if he was attacked. Thinking about how the 100,000 barbarians would stop attacking and surround the Imperial Guard Division, Lin E shuddered. Even so, this surprise attack could still be considered a beautiful victory. Just like that, the Imperial Guard Division circled around Chi Yu's chariot, scattering the barbarian army. The barbarian army's momentum was completely frozen. The Imperial Guard Division's first victory finally ignited the morale of the Leopard Division. Under the command of Zhang Han and Di Qing, the two famous generals of the era, the army on the left and right flanks first used crossbowmen to wear down the enemy's vanguard, then coordinated with the cavalry to harass the enemy, and finally, the infantry to attack. The use of all kinds of troops was as smooth as flowing water. This was the art of war, the art of command. In comparison, Chiyu's army was really a bunch of wild barbarians. When the battle began, Shanghai City unexpectedly took the initiative and seized the initiative. From this, one could see that Han Xian's control of the battlefield was indeed extraordinary. A direct confrontation in the wilderness like this was the greatest test of a commander's art of command. There was no strategy in such a battle, only a grasp of the battlefield's timing. Not only were the opportunities hidden, but they were also fleeting. If one wasn't paying attention, they would disappear without a trace. As the commander of the entire army, Han Xian not only had to ensure the victory of the battle, but he also had to ensure that there weren't too many casualties. Otherwise, the army would be completely crippled after the battle. In that case, no matter how deep Shanghai City's foundation was, it wouldn't be able to hold out for long. The reason why Shanghai City was able to grow stronger and stronger was because it was able to achieve the greatest victory with the smallest price. In the previous battles, Bai Qi had performed outstandingly. This was the first time Han Xian was leading an army on his own, and he didn't want to lose to Bai Qi. Even though he had taken the initiative, there wasn't the slightest hint of joy on Han Xian's face. He knew very well that the key to victory was when the infantry of both sides clashed. The early advantage was not enough to determine the outcome of the battle. The mountain barbarian army was too ferocious. Even though they had suffered a severe warning, even though they had lost their command system, the red-eyed mountain barbarian soldiers still roared and charged forward under the beating of the war drums. They didn't need any commands. The soldiers only had one thought in their minds: charge, 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 brave the rain of arrows from the enemy. Charge, charge, fear no blades or spears. Charge, charge, under the gaze of the king, kill the enemy leader. Blood was glory. Every mountain barbarian had an undefeatable belief. No matter what kind of blow they received, they wouldn't retreat. In the dictionary of the mountain barbarians, the word retreat did not exist. Thus, as soon as the infantry of both sides clashed, Shanghai City suffered a great loss. The initial setback did not affect the mountain barbarians' morale. Instead, it allowed them to vent all their emotions of slaughter, brutality, and evil. Finally, facing the enemy's damned infantry, the red-eyed mountain barbarian soldiers brandished the broadswords and axes in their hands without hesitation. At this moment, only fresh blood could be exchanged for glory. All of a sudden, tens of thousands of broadswords and axes landed on their bodies. The line of defense that the Leopard Tau Corps had just formed seemed to have been slapped by a huge wave. With a whoosh, they all took a step back. Mountains and seas were nothing more than this. His aura was truly terrifying. Even Han Xian's eyes narrowed. The strength of the enemy had clearly exceeded his expectations. At this moment, Han Xian did not make any movements. Instead, he left it to the generals at the front line to judge. Steady, don't be afraid. Steady. Although the commanders at the front line were surprised, they were not afraid. This batch of commanders were all transferred from other divisions to the new division, and they had rich combat experience. Formation. Hurry up and move, bastards. The Leopard Tau Corps was not unprepared for the mountain barbarian army. Facing such a strong enemy, it was absolutely impossible to fight head-on. They had to pay attention to strategy. Their strategy was to use array formations. If the enemy was a hard rock, then what was their natural enemy? Either it was a harder rock, or it was simply turning into water. Softness subdued hardness. The formation that the Leopard Tau Corps practiced was like this. Under the command of the officers, the mountain barbarian soldiers were cleverly lured into the formation one by one, and then surrounded them. In this way, the entire mountain barbarian army was divided into small pieces. Next, the soldiers of the Leopard Tau Corps were able to form a situation where they were outnumbered and surround and annihilate them one by one. In this way, the entire line of defense magically stabilized. Coupled with the harassment of the cavalry troops, The rhythm of the entire war seemed to be entering the Shanghai City mode. Han Xian's solemn expression also relaxed slightly. The formation that he had specially selected finally had an effect. In the confrontation of infantry, not only did the mountain barbarians have the advantage in individual combat strength, but even in terms of numbers, they were able to crush the infantry troops of the Leopard Tau Corps. Even so, it was as if they had fallen into a quagmire, unable to break free. The power of the battle formation was undoubtedly revealed. At this moment, a strange change occurred. Qi Yu, who was on the high platform, suddenly let out a heaven-shaking roar towards the front. Roar! The roar reverberated in all directions. On the battlefield, when all the mountain barbarian soldiers heard the roar of their king, suddenly, as if they had been injected with chicken blood, their eyes crimson red, and their combat strength soared. This scene was not unfamiliar to Ouyang Shua. Frenzy. Damn that Qi Yu. He actually relied on his own strength to make all the mountain barbarians frenzy. It was really too frightening. Since when did berserk become so common? One must know that this was 100,000 mountain barbarians. What kind of concept was it to go berserk at the same time? Ouyang Shua's face finally lost the calm expression. In this battle, Shanghai City might be defeated. Qi Yu, what kind of monster are you to actually have such remarkable abilities? To be continued. Chapter 498. P.S. Updated again. On the flat ground, a strong wind suddenly blew. The collective berserk transformation of 100,000 mountain barbarians completely reversed the situation of Wuzhou County. Shanghai City had never been forced into such a difficult situation by the enemy before. Facing the 100,000 berserk mountain barbarian army, the weakness of the leopard army was exposed. They were in a disadvantageous position and were beaten back step by step. No matter how powerful the formation was, it would pale in front of absolute strength. The berserk mountain barbarians were like a group of brutal butchers. They waved their giant axes and used brute force to break the formation, forming a strong counterattack against the soldiers of the leopard army. Sometimes being barbaric was a shortcut. For a moment, the leopard army suffered heavy casualties, and the entire line of defense was on the verge of collapse. This can't go on. Ouyang Shua's eyes narrowed. He raised his head and looked at Qi Yu again with lingering fear. Ouyang Shua was truly frightened by Qi Yu's roar. The largest scale of the berserk mountain barbarians in Shanghai City was the one in Gushan County led by Yi Lai and the 3rd Division. That was unintentionally triggered by the double stimulation of the battle situation and Yi Lai. Qi Yu could obviously control the berserk transformation of the mountain barbarians. For the mountain barbarians, this had a significance that transcended the era. In this way, the battle strength of the mountain barbarians would double from their original foundation. Ouyang Shua really wanted to know what secret method Qi Yu used to achieve this. With his keen perception, he could feel that the blood energy in Qi Yu's body seemed to have weakened by half. Obviously, Qi Yu's roar did not come without a price. Thank goodness. Ouyang Shua breathed a sigh of relief. If nothing happened after Qi Yu showed his power, Ouyang Shua would have suspected that Gaia had cheated on Qi Yu. Since that was the case, one berserk transformation should be Qi Yu's limit. Unless Qi Yu wanted to risk the danger of his blood energy drying up and take a risk. Ouyang Shua believed that when the battle situation was unfavorable, Qi Yu would definitely personally go into battle. This great demon king had not really shown his power yet. Even so, with just a roar, the army of Shanghai City was in a sorry state. Demon god, Qi Yu was not lying. Wang Feng, Ouyang Shua, suddenly turned his head and looked at the young general who was guarding at the side. Here, gather the troops and follow me into battle. Yes, sir. Wang Feng did not say anything. He turned around and quickly walked down the podium. Marquis, Han Xian was surprised and bewildered upon hearing this, and his eyes were filled with worry. The war had only just begun, but Han Xian had to personally go into battle. Han Xian was truly ashamed. General, there's no need to be like this. No one expected Chi Yu to be so powerful. But, Marquis, your body is priceless. What if? Han Exine hesitated, still wanting to dissuade Ouyang Shaw. Let me think of something else. The army is far from collapsing. There's no need to say anything. Ouyang Shual waved his hand with a firm attitude. I'll leave the command to you, General. With that, Ouyang Shual turned around and walked down the podium. Han Xin sighed helplessly with a melancholic expression when he saw this. It was not until the Marquis disappeared at the top of the stairs that Han Xin turned around and focused on the battle again. At this moment, Han Xin knew very well what his responsibilities were. He had to prove to the Marquis that his soldiers were not weaklings. Otherwise, Han Xin would not have the face to stand in the army of Shanghai City. Ouyang Shaw did not choose to go into battle out of willfulness, but the result of careful consideration. He knew very well that at this moment, what the army needed the most was to boost their morale. At this moment, was there anything more direct and effective than him personally stepping onto the battlefield? At this moment, Ouyang Shua could only take the risk. Originally, Ouyang Shua had planned to wait until the end to fight Chi Yu, but now he had no choice but to attack in advance. He naturally did not expect to rely on his own strength to completely turn the situation around. That was unrealistic. Ouyang Shua only wanted to help the Leopard Tau Corps stabilize their position so that the two sides would not be defeated immediately. As long as they could delay until Shi Wansui and Mountain Pillar Corps arrived, they would win. Ouyang Shua did not want the battle to end prematurely by the time Shi Wansui and the others arrived. If that happened, they would not only be defeated in this battle, but it would also cause a chain reaction. Once Chiyo's army won, they would charge straight into Zhaoqing Prefecture. In that case, the Sunbin Corps stationed in the east of Zhaoqing Prefecture would be attacked from both sides. It was not impossible for Zhaoqing Prefecture to be lost. The entire territory of Shanghai City would not be at peace. Needless to say, once Shanghai City was defeated, the allies of the Shanghai Alliance would immediately be in a difficult situation. Shanghai City was the flag of the alliance. In such a chaotic situation, there was no worse news than the defeat of Shanghai City. Di Chun and the others would probably wake up laughing even in their dreams. At the very least, Bai Hua's situation would become even more difficult. If this continued, Ouyang Shua's entire hegemony would suffer a heavy setback. This was something that Ouyang Shua could not tolerate. Therefore, even if he had to put himself in danger, Ouyang Shua had to do it. There were two reasons why the situation was so grim. Firstly, it was because the entire China region was in such a dire situation. Secondly, it was because Shanghai City had expanded too quickly. Because of this, Shanghai City was surrounded by enemies on all sides. If they were not careful, they would lose the entire game. Of course, if they won this battle, Shanghai City would have a bright future. This was the most crucial battle since the establishment of the village. This was a battle that Shanghai City could not afford to lose. Because it was a secret march, the Shi Wansui Regiment and the Mountain Pillar Regiment could not follow too closely. Otherwise, they would immediately be discovered by the spies of Chiyo's army. Last night, the intelligence officer sent the latest news through a hummingbird. The two regiments would definitely arrive at the battlefield by 2 in the afternoon. Ouyang Shua raised his head and looked at the scorching sun in the sky. There was still about an hour before noon. In other words, the Leopard Tau Corps had to hold on for another 3 hours before reinforcements arrived. Ouyang Shua's mission was to delay this life and death situation for 3 hours. This was a difficult task. The berserk state of the mountain barbarians could not be maintained for too long. The most important thing was to block this wave of attacks and not let the army be defeated. If it was the Dragon Xiang Corps that was fighting at this time, Ouyang Shua would not be so worried at all. The Dragon Xiang Corps was the oldest corps in the territory. Other than the newly formed 5th Regiment, the remaining 4 regiments were all battle-hardened. Even if they were to face the berserk mountain barbarians, they would not be afraid. Unfortunately, the ones facing the mountain barbarians were the newly formed Leopard Tau Corps. He hoped that after this tempering of blood and fire, the Leopard Tau Corps would be able to grow quickly. On the empty space in front of the command platform, the 3,000 divine guards had already gathered. After Ouyang Shua came down, he did not say anything and directly mounted the green lightning and took out the sky demon spear. Move out. He pointed the spear and took the lead to rush out of the camp. Kill. The 3,000 divine guards surrounded Ouyang Shua and fiercely killed their way into the battlefield. The scarlet cloak of the cavalrymen, under the contrast of the red clouds, appeared even more scarlet. Following the divine guard's attack, the Golden Lord flag immediately fluttered on the battlefield. Marquis. It's a marquis. The marquis is here. Seeing the golden flag from afar, the entire Leopard Tau Corps began to boil. Ouyang Shua's face darkened as he directly led his troops into the core area of the battlefield. With a thrust of his spear, a berserk mountain barbarian immediately died on the spot and saved a small soldier from the axe. The spear danced. None of the mountain barbarians were a match for Ouyang Shua's spear. Perhaps it was due to the influence of the red clouds in the sky. Ouyang Shua faintly felt that the sky demon spear in his hand was more active and bloodthirsty than usual. On the body of the spear, blood chi flowed like blood vessels. That was the thirst for blood. Old friend. Ouyang Shua faintly smiled and stepped on the green lightning as if there was no one there. The divine guards were like a hurricane that wreaked havoc on the battlefield. Good. Seeing the marquis so mighty, the morale of the soldiers of the Leopard Tau Corps was instantly boosted. Killing the enemy was not Ouyang Shua's goal. Stabilizing the morale of the army was the most important task at hand. Therefore, Ouyang Shua fully displayed his martial arts and must use the most shocking method to kill the enemy. The berserk mountain barbarians were like paper tigers in front of Ouyang Shua. Ouyang Shua wanted the soldiers to realize that there was actually nothing to fear from the berserk mountain barbarians, thus dispelling the fear in their hearts. As long as a person was not afraid, he could create miracles on the battlefield. Ouyang Shua led his troops and swiftly moved between the two sides of the battlefield. Everywhere he went, he showed no mercy and unleashed a shocking massacre, displaying the Yang family's spear technique to the extreme. Along the way, he stabilized the morale of the army. Ouyang Shua's actions were immediately effective. The fear in the soldiers' hearts was immediately reduced. They began to pull themselves together and once again activated the formation that they had practiced in advance. But this time, trapping the enemy was more important than killing the enemy. No matter how the mountain barbarians charged left and right into formation, the soldiers surrounded them but did not kill them. The mountain barbarians were helpless. These berserk soldiers seemed to have used all their strength but hit a sponge. They were depressed and aggrieved. When the berserk state of the mountain barbarians was over, the battle would begin again. Half an hour. In just half an hour, Ouyang Shua had stabilized the morale of the army. On the command platform, Han Xian was both happy and ashamed. The Marquis had completed his task. Next, it was Han Xian's turn to attack. Han Xian stood on the high platform and had a panoramic view of the situation on the battlefield. His brain was operating at high speed like a computer. After a while, Han Xian began to wave the flag frequently and began to mobilize the troops. Under Han Xian's command, the cavalry of the various divisions were fully unleashed. The major forces on the left and right flanks cooperated with each other and formed one large formation after another. Countless small formations connected with each other and formed an incomparably large formation. The army of 100,000 mountain barbarians suddenly seemed to have entered a maze. They could no longer distinguish north from south. To be continued. Chapter 499. P.S. Happy New Year to my friends. All your wishes come true. The blazing sun hung high in the sky, and the red clouds loomed overhead. In a vast wilderness, the two armies fought against each other. After the efforts of Ouyang Shua and Han Xian, the entire battle situation finally stabilized, and the Leopard Tau Corps was forcefully pulled back from the edge of collapse. What followed was another bitter battle. For both sides, This was a test of willpower and physical strength. Noon passed, and the blazing sun hung high in the sky. The killing in the wilderness did not have the slightest intention of stopping, and no one dared to rest. Shouts of killing rang out incessantly. The soldiers did not seem to feel hunger, and there was only killing in their eyes. The surging killing intent filled the space between heaven and earth. The red clouds in the sky seemed to have become even thicker. The berserk state of the mountain barbarians had already been lifted, and their battle strength was greatly reduced. The after effects of the berserk state were slowly appearing. The mountain barbarian army began to suffer a large number of casualties. As the saying goes, take your life while you are ill. Han Xian's grasp of opportunities was top-notch in the present age. He immediately adjusted the formation again and commanded the army to begin a fierce slaughter against the mountain barbarians. The entire Leopard Tau Corps was like a huge meat grinder, sending the mountain barbarian army to its end. The unyielding soldiers fell one by one. On the high platform, Chi Yu's expression fluctuated for the first time, and he was no longer expressionless. Although Chi Yu had constantly learned from the Han people after entering the wilderness, he really did not understand the methods of battle formations. Chi Yu did not expect that the seemingly unremarkable formation could actually defeat the soldiers under his command. Looking at the golden flag on the battlefield, Chi Yu's mouth suddenly revealed a trace of a cold smile. In the next moment, Chi Yu disappeared from the high platform. Woo! An even more vigorous and distant horn sound suddenly sounded on the battlefield. Not good. Han Xian was shocked and looked up, only to see that on the opposite high platform, Chi Yu's figure had already disappeared. When he looked again, the guards around the carriage had also disappeared. Accompanied by the vigorous horn sound, Chi Yu led 1,000 blood guards, like a red arrow, and broke into the battlefield. For a moment, all the mountain barbarians were boiling. Their king had appeared. Like the mountain barbarians, Chi Yu did not have a mount. Holding a giant axe, he ran like the wind. In a short while, he arrived at the center of the battlefield and pointed his weapon at the divine martial guards led by Ouyang Shua. Protect the Marquis. In the middle of the formation, the commander of the 2nd Division, Wei Zhang, was shocked when he saw Chi Yu's intentions. He immediately mobilized his troops to surround Chi Yu, vowing to stop him. Ants! Chi Yu roared, his voice reverberating in all directions. He swept the giant axe in his hand forward. Voila! It was like cutting tofu. In an instant, more than a dozen soldiers were swept by the giant axe and split into two. The upper half of their bodies flew into the sky, their eyes still filled with disbelief. This was too shocking. The entire battlefield fell silent. Voila! Following that, deafening cheers erupted from the mountain barbarian army. Hula! Hula! Their king was invincible. Chi Yu smiled coldly. Still not satisfied, he swung his giant axe down once more. Any enemy in front of him was shrouded in the shadow of the giant axe. Demon god Chi Yu began a massacre. Help! Miserable shrieks lingered in the air. In an instant, broken limbs were strewn all over the ground, and blood flowed everywhere. Even the soldiers who had been through hundreds of battles turned pale in the face of such a brutal and bloody scene. The blood guard behind Chi Yu were equally brutal, and they began a frenzied massacre of the enemy. It was unheard of for 1,000 blood guards to be able to hold their ground against an entire regiment. A red whirlwind wreaked havoc in the middle of the battlefield. No one could withstand it. The Chi Yu blood guards finally revealed their extraordinary power in front of the world. Every blood guard was a cold machine, but they were all highly skilled and knew how to cooperate with each other. Such blood guards were rare in the world. Protect the Marquis with our lives. Wei Zhang was furious to see Chi Yu leading his troops through all the obstacles. He patted his warhorse and jumped out, fighting with demon god Chi Yu. Demon god Chi Yu was as arrogant as ever. The huge axe chopped down on Wei Zhang's head. It was clearly an ordinary move, but when Wei Zhang received it, he and his horse were both shaken. The elite war horse could not withstand it and was about to kneel on the ground. Such power was rare in the world. Even Xiang Yu the Overlord did not have such power. But Wei Zhang could not retreat. He patted his horse again. Interesting. Qi Yu sneered, as if he was ready to play with Wei Zhang. Although Wei Zhang was riding a green beetle horse, in terms of height, they were about the same. From this, it could be seen that Qi Yu was much taller than ordinary people. It was no wonder that Qi Yu did not have a mount. In the wilderness, perhaps even desolate beasts could not withstand the weight of a fiend celestial like Qi Yu. Qi Yu himself was a beast in human form. Wei Zhang took on Qi Yu for the time being. The soldiers of the 2nd Division were not cowards. They stepped forward bravely and fought with the 1,000 Qi Yu blood guards. Further away, Han Xian was already mobilizing his troops to surround and kill Qi Yu. Han Xian was making a risky move. As long as they could kill Qi Yu, they would definitely win the battle. Seeing this, the mountain barbarians were naturally unconvinced. They roared and fought with the Leopard Tau army, blocking their way. For a moment, the battle between the two sides became more and more intense. Everyone was competing with each other. The entire battle was full of ups and downs, full of twists and turns. Like Ouyang Shaw, Qi Yu led the mountain barbarian army out of the quagmire with his own strength. The entire battle seemed to be in a stalemate again. Ouyang Shaw, who was not far away, saw more. He noticed that as he killed, the blood energy in Qi Yu's body was miraculously increasing. Could it be that Qi Yu was like the sky demon spear in his hand and could also absorb the enemy's blood energy? Thinking of this, Ouyang Shaw had mixed feelings. How many more surprises did this demon god want to give him? I can't let Qi Yu continue killing. Ouyang Shaw's eyes were resolute. Once Qi Yu absorbed enough blood energy, he would activate the collective frenzy again. The battered Leopard Tau army would really be finished. Qi Yu, since you dare to go, be prepared to die in battle. Ouyang Shaw's eyes were cold. There was no longer a trace of fear. This was his personality. He became stronger when he met the strong. Divine martial guards, follow me to kill Qi Yu. Ouyang Shaw patted his warhorse and was about to charge into the center of the battlefield. Marquis, no. This time, Wang Feng objected in front of Ouyang Shaw, which was rare. Everyone knew that Qi Yu was invincible now. If Marquis went now, he would be in danger. As a commander of the Divine Martial Guards, Wang Feng did not dare to let Marquis take such a huge risk, because Wang Feng was not confident that he could protect Marquis in front of Qi Yu. Impudent. Ouyang Shaw's face was cold, and his tone was filled with anger. Did this Wang Feng not know how urgent the situation was? How could he be so wishy-washy at this time? Marquis, please forgive me. I was impolite. Let the men deal with Qi Yu. Wang Feng's attitude was extremely firm. He signaled Chen Damong with his eyes to stop Marquis while he led the Divine Martial Guards into the battlefield. Ouyang Shaw was furious. He did not expect to be tricked by Wang Feng. Move! Seeing Wang Feng leading the troops away, Ouyang Shaw shouted at Chen Daming. He did not expect this guard captain to be so stubborn. Chen Daming knew that he would not be able to stop the Marquis with brute force. This tall man was too ruthless. With a swoosh, Chen Daming suddenly put the broadsword to his neck and said, "If Marquis goes over, I will cut my throat and die as an apology." Ouyang Shaw was furious. Seeing Chen Daming's honest expression, Ouyang Shaw really wanted to whip him. Why didn't he realize that the captain of the guards was also such a sly person? You're rebelling. Ouyang Shaw was exasperated, but there was nothing he could do. He knew that this guard captain was also a stubborn person. He would really die to atone for his crime. I'll teach you a lesson in the future. Ouyang Shaw glared at Chen Damong and turned to the battlefield in the distance. With the arrival of the Divine Martial Guards, 2nd Division finally breathed a sigh of relief. In just a short time, the 2nd Division had lost thousands of men. It was really shocking. The two guards had just started fighting, and it was obvious who was stronger. In a one-on-one situation, the Qi Yu Blood Guards were at least 50% stronger than the Divine Martial Guards. What a bunch of monsters! Fortunately, they only had 1,000 men. Otherwise, the Divine Martial Guards would have suffered a great loss this time. On this side, the The Qiyu Blood Guards were stopped by the Divine Martial Guards. On the other side, Wei Zhang was surrounded by danger. Seeing that the enemy's elites had arrived, Qiyu no longer had the mood to play games. All of a sudden, his giant axe became swift and fierce. Each axe was stronger than the previous one. Wei Zhang was one of Shanghai City's generals, after all. His individual combat strength was probably even stronger than the likes of Lin, Yi, and Wang Feng. Even so, facing Qiyu's fierce attack, he was still shocked. He was like a lone boat, struggling to survive in the vast sea of enemies. One after another, the waves crashed down, and if he was careless, he would die on the spot. General, seeing that Wei Zhang was in danger, the soldiers of 2nd Division immediately came to help. Unfortunately, it was too late. Or rather, everything happened too fast. Qiyu roared again, and his body suddenly expanded again. The broadsword in his hand, like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, chopped down at Wei Zhang. This time, Wei Zhang was caught off guard. It was too late to block. Wei Zhang could only watch helplessly as Qiyu's giant axe chopped down from his shoulder. With a swoosh sound, Wei Zhang's entire body was split into 2 halves. Blood splattered everywhere. Shanghai City's general, Wei Zhang, died on the spot. General, the soldiers of 2nd Division cried out in grief. With red eyes, they charged at Qiyu. Qiyu died. A bunch of ants. Qiyu sneered and wiped the blood off his face, which made him look even more ferocious. To be continued. Chapter 500. In history, Yang Xiuqing had always been in charge of the affairs of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. If he hadn't been ambitious and tried to replace Hong Xiuquan, his achievements in life would have been much greater. That was why Hong Xiuquan was extremely afraid of Yang Xiuqing in the wilderness. Hong Xiuquan had put Yang Xiuqing in the army from the beginning and didn't let him interfere in the affairs of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. However, Hong Xiuquan was an expert in creating doctrines, organizing sects, and playing politics. But when it came to governing the country, Hong Xiuquan was a complete layman. Therefore, the 3 counties under the rule of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom weren't in a good economic situation. They were only managed by Hong Xiuquan's personal prestige. The people under the rule of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom were extremely poor. It was easy to change mountains and rivers, but it was hard to change one's nature. Although Hong Xiuquan wasn't as extravagant and licentious as he was in his previous life, he couldn't help but enjoy himself. The idea of sharing the world that he had put forward in his previous life was also completely abandoned. Hong Xiuquan in this life was an out-and-out supreme ruler. Back on the battlefield, Yang Xiuqing led the troops to launch the 3rd fierce attack on Mulan Fortress. The battlefield was filled with smoke. Boom! Under the continuous bombardment of the cannons, the walls of Mulan Fortress were under great pressure. The Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's southern army was fearless. The soldiers held their iron shields fearlessly and swore to defend the 4 cannons with their lives. They were determined to blast a big hole in Mulan Fortress. How could the cannons of the Ming Dynasty be easy? In a rumbling sound, a big hole was finally blasted in a corner of the eastern wall. Aim at that big hole and blow it up. The commander of the cannons was excited. He had already seen the dawn of victory. So, the 4 cannons fired at the same time. One after another, Thunderbolt bombarded the big hole. The crater on the city wall grew bigger and deeper. Due to the shortcomings of the cannons of the Ming Dynasty, the accuracy of the cannons at this time was really poor. It was already extremely lucky that one of the 4 cannons hit the big hole. During the Ming Dynasty, both guns and cannons were widely used. But why didn't they completely replace cold weapons with hot weapons like in the West? There were 4 main reasons. First, the cannons had to be able to fire explosive shells. Why? This was because only explosive bombs could transform a cannon from a siege weapon into a field weapon that could kill a large number of living targets. On the other hand, if it could only shoot solid iron balls, its lethality would naturally be limited. A cannonball shot out and exploded into countless fragments, causing a large area of destruction. The Ming Dynasty's poisonous flame flying gun had a barrel made of wrought iron and was filled with more than 10 taels of gunpowder. The cannonball was cast from pig iron and was filled with 5 taels of arsenic and sulfur poison. After igniting the gun, the cannonball would fly 300 meters away and explode, injuring people. Unfortunately, this technology was not mature during the Ming Dynasty and was not widely used. In the Qing Dynasty, not only did they not improve on this, but they also regressed. They switched to using solid iron lumps and even stones and iron filings to replace the cannonballs. Before the Westernization movement, the power of the cannons of the Qing Dynasty was naturally child's play. In the 1870s, Zhuge Zongtong set out on an expedition to the west. In Shaanxi's Fengxiang, he discovered the explosive cannonball of the late Ming Dynasty. He could not help but sigh with emotion. Sharp weapons have been in China for more than 300 years. If someone had paid attention to them at that time, why would the islanders be able to roam the seas unhindered for decades? The Manchurian Qing army paid a heavy price in the Opium War due to their conservative ideology on weapons and equipment. Before the Westernization movement, during the 200 years of the Qing Dynasty, firearms technology had regressed even more than in the late Ming Dynasty. Compared to the Ming Dynasty, the Manchurian rulers were ignorant. Secondly, the cannons had to be quite mobile. If the cannons were not mobile, it would be difficult to concentrate a large number of them. The cannons of the Ming Dynasty, whether it was the Crouching Tiger cannon, the Francis machine gun, or the later Hongyi cannon, were not mobile. Although the Crouching Tiger cannon wasn't big, it had to be nailed to the ground with a big iron nail before it could be fired. The Red Barbarian cannon was originally a Portuguese naval cannon, weighing over 1,000 caddies. It was too cumbersome and could only be used to defend a city. On the other hand, in the West, the cannons were of a suitable caliber and could be pulled by horses. In a short period of time, they could quickly form an artillery position. The Ming army also had horse-drawn cannon carriages, but the power of the cannons on the carriages was too small. Just like the 5 cannons that the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom transported from Tianjin, they had spent a lot of effort on the way. Otherwise, the number of cannons on the battlefield would not be 5, but 10, or even more. Thirdly, there must be a considerable number of flintlock troops. Even matchlocks had a great advantage over bows and arrows, not to mention flintlocks that could fire 4 to 5 shots per minute. During Japan's Warring States period, Oda Nobunaga's flintlock 3-shot was famous for a period of time. Unfortunately, the Ming Dynasty's army never had a true firearm unit. The large and small guns didn't have a unified standard, which was a huge burden on the logistics. Some guns even needed 2 people to operate on bamboo racks, which was extremely inconvenient. Fourthly, the cannons had to have a certain level of fire control. The so-called fire control referred to the use of instruments such as the gauge, ruler, and torque, as well as the mastery of the technique of loading ammunition. Without this, the accuracy of firearms was a joke. Before a good gunner fired a cannon, he had to estimate how far the enemy was. Although he could estimate the distance from the size of the human figure through the telescope, he could accurately measure the distance using torque. In the early years of Chongzhen, the Ming army's imitation of the Red Barbarian cannon had already entered the stage of mass production. However, the Western method of using instruments to improve the accuracy of the cannon's aiming had always been the blind spot of many Ming gunners. Hong Xiuquan had obtained the Ming Dynasty Cannon Manufacturing Technical Manual, but he naturally didn't have the ability to improve the Ming cannons. It was already extremely difficult to produce the cannons according to the manual. Therefore, the 4 cannons of the Southern Army could be seen in the crosshairs. The 4 cannons had been bombarding the city for the entire morning, but only 8 of the cannons had accurately hit the crater on the city wall. The rest of the cannons had all missed. Yang Xiuqing's face turned green with anger when he saw this, but he couldn't do anything. In just one morning, the Southern Army had lost another 6,000 men. The Southern Army had lost more than 30,000 men in total, but there was no progress. Yang Xiuqing's face turned even uglier when he thought of Hong Xiuquan's forceful reply. He ordered the army to hold their ground and not retreat to rest until the city wall was destroyed. On the city wall of Mulan Fortress, Bai Chi's expression was unprecedentedly serious. Although the enemy's cannons had yet to be effective, they had given Bai Chi a huge shock. As a general from the Warring States period, Bai Chi was very unfamiliar with firearms. How could Bai Chi not be shocked when he saw that the enemy had pushed out a giant metal monster that could blast through the city wall that was several meters thick? Bai Chi immediately realized that with the appearance of cannons, there would be a revolution on the battlefield in the future. As a divine general, Bai Chi would never be satisfied with the current situation and give up on learning and improving. After this battle, he would have to learn more about firearms. It seemed that it was only a matter of time before the city wall was destroyed. Bai Chi immediately gave the order to mobilize 10 fortress blade carts and have them stand by the city walls to the north. The fortress carts were used to block the city gate when the city gate was breached. The front wall was equipped with 24 steel knives, which could be used to push the carts to the gap of the city gate. It could kill the enemy and block the enemy's arrows and stones. This way, it would be difficult for the enemy to climb up and form a moving barrier. Therefore, the fortress carts were the most useful emergency weapon when the city was breached. The Milan fortress had adopted a complicated design for the city gate when it was first designed. Not only were there 2 continuous barbicans, but the main city gate was also blocked by a huge rock. The rock gate could only be lifted with the help of a machine. This set of machine was specially improved after the Mo family took over the fortress. Therefore, for the Southern Army of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, if they wanted to break through the gate of the Milan fortress, it would be easier and more straightforward to bombard the city wall. The only shortcoming of the Milan fortress was that it did not have a moat. Now that the enemy was going to bombard the city wall, Bai Chi could only mobilize the fortress carts to organize the defense. In addition, Bai Chi also sent a fierce general, Lai, to lead 2 mountain barbarian heavy infantry brigades of the 3rd Division to be on standby near the northern city wall. Once the city wall was breached, there would definitely be a bloody battle at the northern city wall. Whether they could block the enemy's attack and defend the gap was the key to this battle. At this time, Bai Chi naturally mobilized the most elite troops to participate in the defense. In the entire Shanghai City Army, there was no mountain barbarian heavy infantry brigade, so this iron wall was more suitable. After everything was arranged properly, Bai Chi breathed a sigh of relief. He had already prepared for the worst. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the entire battle situation ushered in the biggest turning point. Boom! As an iron cannonball accurately hit the previous big hole, the section of the city wall on the east side finally collapsed, and a huge hole was blasted out. Immediately, the Southern Army of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom let out a deafening cheer, as if they had won. Yang Xiuqing's complexion also improved slightly. He knew that the morale at this time could be used. There was no need to wait until tomorrow. He immediately issued the order to use the hole in the city wall as a breakthrough point and launched the fiercest attack on the Milan fortress. They had to win the battle. The ones charging at the forefront were Li Xiuqing's troops. Kill! The young general, Li Xiuqing, led the vanguard troops, which were also the most elite infantry under his command, and immediately charged toward the big hole. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was unafraid of death. The moment the city wall collapsed, the soldiers of Shanghai City cleared away the rubble at the fastest speed possible and pushed the 2 saber carts accurately into the hole. Lai led the Mountain Barbarian Heavy Infantry Brigade and waited behind the fortress carts. The Rakshasa that Lai was sitting on let out a series of roars, and it could not wait to rush into the battlefield. The most difficult offensive and defensive battle was about to begin in the narrow hole. To be continued. Chapter 501. The sunset glow shone in the sky again. What was different was that the sunset glow this time was particularly enchanting. It was orange-red like blood, and when combined with the thick blood-red clouds in the sky, it gave off an oppressive feeling. As far as the eye could see, the world was filled with a horrifying red, tragic and deathly silent. The autumn wind blew, bringing with it waves of low whistles. The bloody battle at the foot of the Milan fortress had come to an end. The mountain barbarian soldiers in heavy iron armor leaned against the base of the wall, panting heavily, unable to move. Their armor was covered with knife marks and bloodstains. Not far away, the hole in the wall was littered with corpses. Some belonged to the mountain barbarians, but most belonged to the Taiping army. Their yellow uniforms were extremely conspicuous on the battlefield. The fierce battle had lasted for an entire afternoon. Both sides had surrounded the hole and fought to the death. No one dared to retreat, even half a step. The small hole seemed to have become a forbidden zone for all life. Whoever dared to take another step would be walking into an abyss. Only the most powerful soldiers could struggle out of the abyss. Several times, the Taiping army had already rushed through the hole and fought their way into the fortress without fear of death. However, they were forced back again and again by the mountain barbarian soldiers led by Eli. Such a small position had changed hands 5 or 6 times in a single afternoon. Every inch of land was stained with the blood of countless soldiers. Mottled bloodstains were left on the city wall. Under the reflection of the sunset glow, it looked even more desolate. This was the most tragic battle since the start of the war. Shanghai City relied on the tenacity of the mountain barbarian soldiers to finally defend their position. Not only that, Eli had also caught a big fish. He was the deputy general of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's Southern Army, Li Xiuqing. As one of the pillars of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's later period, Li Xiuqing was born in a poor farmer's family. When he was young, he lived a very difficult life with his parents. After joining the Taiping army, Li Xiuqing fought bravely and quickly rose from an ordinary soldier to a young general. After the chaos in Tianjin, he, Chen Yuqing, Li Shixian, and the others fought against the dangerous situation and won military victories, such as defeating the Zhongbei barracks, the Sana barracks, and the Jiangnan barracks. They also established Sufu province and Tianjia province, reviving the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. Heavenly King Hong Xiuquan conferred Li Xiuqing the title of Prince of Loyalty. After Tianjin fell, Li Xiuqing was captured and killed. Li Xiuqing was soft on the outside, but hard on the inside. Because he was born poor, he was very concerned about the suffering of the common people. He even valued helping others more than his reputation. As Li Xiuqing's opponents, Sun Guofan and the others called Li Xiuqing as cunning as a fox. It was this famous general who led his troops to occupy the entrance of the cave. Because he rushed too far ahead, the guards couldn't protect him in time, and Eli seized the opportunity to severely injure him and put him in custody. It was precisely Li Xiuqing's capture that pushed the intense battle in the afternoon to its climax. When Li Xiuqing's troops saw that their commander had been captured, they suddenly seemed to have gone mad, launching wave after wave of attacks without fear of death, not caring about their own lives at all. Even the powerful mountain barbarian warriors found it hard to deal with such a savage army. If it weren't for evil, who stood at the forefront of the troops and boosted their morale, the Taiping army might have broken in. Even so, the barbarian warriors suffered heavy losses. 500 of the most elite barbarians were forever buried at the foot of this nameless city wall, and thousands of Taiping soldiers died in the battle. There were probably no less than 4,000 soldiers of the Taiping army who were killed at the entrance of the cave. At the end of the battle, the corpses of those who died in the battle were enough to block the entrance of the cave. The attacking Taiping army had to clear the passageway again and again before they could continue their attack. When the evening glow appeared, Li Xiuqing's troops had been completely destroyed. Even so, this group of men still continued to charge. This showed Li Xiuqing's prestige in the army, and he must have been very loved by the officers and soldiers, which was why they were so crazy. In the end, it was Yang Xiuqing who personally gave the order to withdraw the remnants of Li Xiuqing's troops from the battlefield. "You little bastards, get up for this, Daddy. The general said that you fought well in the afternoon and should be rewarded." The silent atmosphere was suddenly broken by a rough voice. The speaker was Evil, who had made the greatest contribution in this battle. This evil man didn't know what fear and exhaustion were. After an afternoon of fierce fighting, the valiant barbarian soldiers were all so tired that they collapsed on the ground. However, the general acted as if nothing had happened. After the battle, Evil immediately ran to Bai Qi to ask for credit. When he came back, there was an innocent smile on his face. Because he left in a hurry, he didn't have time to clean up the bloodstains on his face. His smile stretched the muscles on his face and moved the bloodstains on his face. When the soldiers saw this, they couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. Of course, towards this commander Eli, the barbarian soldiers wholeheartedly respected him. The barbarians worshipped the strong. Evil was simply a synonym for the strong. In the battle in the afternoon, more than 100 people died under Evil's iron halberds. Not to mention, Evil's shocking attack directly captured the enemy's general. Such a result really made the barbarians sweat. Evil was brave and fierce, but he was not scheming. In front of the soldiers, he didn't put on any airs of a general. Because of this, Evil was sincerely supported by the barbarians. Some soldiers joked that General Evil must have the blood of barbarians flowing in his body. Otherwise, how could his temperament be so compatible with them? Even when facing Bai Qi, the barbarians had never been so respectful. However, this time, the soldiers were really too tired. They were so tired that their brains had stopped working. They just wanted to lean against the wall and sleep comfortably. Seeing this, Eli was not displeased at all. Using his deafening voice, he loudly shouted, "Hey, brats, I was just praising you in front of the great general, but now you're all dead? Why, in just one afternoon, have you all become soft eggs? You don't even have the strength to snort?" Facing the general's teasing, the soldiers could only roll their eyes. Seeing the general jumping around, the soldiers really couldn't refute and could only admit defeat. Seeing this, Eli was delighted, and he laughed without the slightest restraint. At this moment, Evil was like a great demon king. Outside of the battlefield, he could still laugh proudly. After laughing for a while, Evil remembered the important matter and loudly announced, "The general has ordered that in this battle, the 1st and 2nd brigades will each receive a 6th-class merit. All soldiers will be promoted by 1 rank. At the same time, in order to reward everyone, the general has specially ordered to give everyone an extra meal tonight. Barbecued meat." This time, the barbarians finally became spirited. Their eyes lit up like thieves. To be continued. Chapter 502. Ever since Shanghai City introduced the military rank system, military rank meant life and honor to the soldiers. The mountain barbarian soldiers didn't expect General Bai Qi to be so generous this time. He actually promoted all of them by 1 rank, which was a very great reward. Seeing this, Eli was also in a good mood. He laughed and said, "Brats, let's go and eat meat. If we're late, there won't be any good meat left." As he spoke, he walked toward the camp. Whoosh! The mountain barbarian soldiers, who had been crouching in the corner, suddenly became spirited and ran faster than rabbits toward the camp. Seeing this, Eli laughed like a demon. Compared to the jubilation in Mulan Fortress, the south camp of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom was gloomy. Their attacks had been thwarted repeatedly, and the soldiers had suffered heavy casualties. In addition, Deputy General Li Xiuqing had been captured. The series of blows had weakened the Taiping army's tenacious nerves. After retreating from the battlefield, the remnants of Li Xiuqing's troops ran to the commander's tent and made a scene, begging General Yang Xiuqing to send troops again the next day to rescue Li Xiuqing. The soldiers' nonsense had completely annoyed Yang Xiuqing. The few soldiers who had led the trouble were hung on the gate and whipped 20 times. Seeing that their general was angry, the Taiping army soldiers were even more silent. The entire camp was quiet, without a trace of life. The soldiers didn't dare to make too much noise even when they were eating. Yang Xiuqing locked himself in the tent and didn't see anyone. He didn't even eat dinner. It wasn't until 9 o'clock that Yang Xiuqing suddenly informed the generals to go to the tent for a meeting. After a while, all the soldiers gathered in the commander's tent, feeling uneasy. The leaders were the left general, Lin Fengxiang, and the right general, Chen Yuqing. The left general, Lin Fengxiang, was a famous general of the Taiping army in the northern expedition. He was also a farmer. When he joined the Taiping army, He served as an imperial guard and was promoted to Marquis Jing-hu. The Northern Expedition Army of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom was in a difficult situation because it was alone and they didn't have enough provisions. In 1854, they retreated south to Mount City. Ji Wenyuan died in battle, and they retreated to Dongguan Liantown. In February 1855, the Qing army attacked Liantown. Lin Fengxiang supervised the troops and fought hard, defeating the enemy repeatedly. In March, Lin Zhan fell into enemy hands. Lin Fengxiang was wounded and captured. He was later released to Beijing to die as a martyr. He was 31 years old at the time. After that, Hong Xiuquan was conferred the title of Qiu Wang in Lin Fengxiang. Although Lin Fengxiang was born in the wilderness, he was calm and collected in battle. He could lead the charge and break through enemy lines, but he could also be calm and composed, and he could give commands calmly. Therefore, he was considered a rare general in the Taiping army. The general of the right, Chun Yuqing, was a young general who was as famous as Li Xiuqing. Like the other generals of the Taiping army, Chun Yuqing was also a guest. He was an important general in the later period of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. He was conferred the title of King Ying because he was brave and good at fighting. Because Chun Yuqing had moles under his eyes, he looked like he had 4 eyes from afar. In 1862, Miao Pailin, a traitor of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, was lured into a trap and sent to the Qing camp. In front of the enemy, he was awe-inspiring, steadfast, and unyielding, and died a martyr's death at the age of 26. Chun Yuqing was one of the few generals in the Taiping army who was highly skilled in martial arts. Ever since he was young, he had trained hard in spear techniques. Because of his excellent spear techniques, he had even earned the good name of 30 Sudden Thrust. The two of them stood on either side of him, while the other generals took their seats according to their positions. Yang Xiuqing sat upright on the seat of honor, his face expressionless. He looked around and said in a deep voice, "Today's defeat is not enough to change the situation of the war. Our army still has the advantage in numbers and the initiative in the war." At this point, Yang Xiuqing paused for a moment, as if he was trying to strengthen his confidence. Then, he continued in a powerful and resonant voice. "Therefore, the generals and soldiers must not be discouraged, but they must not harbor any thoughts that they shouldn't have. I'll say the ugly words first. No matter what, no matter how heavy the price we have to pay, we must conquer Mulan Fortress. We pledge our lives to the Heavenly King." All the generals and soldiers responded in unison, their expressions fanatical. It had to be said that Hong Xiuquan's brainwashing of the generals and soldiers was really amazing. In this regard, Ouyang Shuo was far inferior. In the Taiping army, both the generals and the soldiers had an inexplicable and fanatical belief in the ideal world described by Hong Xiuquan. The power of this belief was extremely terrifying. Driven by this power, although the Taiping army had suffered setbacks for 3 days in a row, the morale of the army was not greatly affected. They were still full of fighting spirit. "Good." Yang Xiuqing suddenly stood up and said in a loud voice, "In that case, in tomorrow's battle, we must not leave any leeway. If one hole can't break through Mulan Fortress, then we'll make 2 or 3 holes. Even if Mulan Fortress is impregnable, it can't stop our Taiping army's determination to attack. Fight to the death." Hearing that, the generals and soldiers' expressions became more and more fanatical. Even Lin Fengxiang and Chun Yuqing could not help but feel their blood boiling and their bodies full of energy. Of course, at this moment, the generals sensibly did not mention Li Xiuqing, who had been captured. Because for the soldiers of the Taiping army, once they were captured, it was the best choice to die bravely. No one had expected that Li Xiuqing could come out alive. The Heavenly King had said that once the warriors in the army died, they would be able to live forever in the Heavenly Kingdom. That was why Yang Xiuqing was so angry at what Li Xiuqing's remaining troops had done, because those soldiers had touched the scars of the entire Taiping army. "Retreat and get ready." Yang Xiuqing summoned the generals not to arrange any tactics, but to boost the morale of the army. As for tactics, in the current situation, there was no other way but to attack. When the generals and soldiers left, Yang Xiuqing let out a long sigh. Being in the situation, Yang Xiuqing could see it more clearly than anyone else. If they continued to fight like this, even if they could capture Mulan Fortress, half of the southern army would be destroyed. After the fortress was captured, there would be a large army waiting for them behind a mountain. Was it worth it to make such a huge sacrifice for a harbor? Yang Xiuqing was skeptical about the decision made by Hong Xiuquan, the Heavenly King. He admitted that building warships was indeed the best way to unleash the power of cannons. But wasn't it a little too hasty? The progress of the Western Army was not as smooth as expected. After a series of victories in the early stage, they were attacked by the enemy tenaciously. The road to the west was in a deadlock. At this time, it was not worth it to waste the huge southern army at the foot of Mulan Fortress. At this moment, whether the southern army went to help the western army or launched a northern expedition, it was a good choice. Yang Xiuqing could not understand why the Heavenly King was not willing to compromise. In fact, since the first day he showed up in the wilderness, Yang Xiuqing had vaguely felt that the Heavenly King was suspicious of him. For Yang Xiuqing, this kind of suspicion was unreasonable. To be continued. Each of them shouted like animals. Those who didn't know would think that they were going to rush into the enemy's camp under the cover of the night. Exactly. The barbarian warriors are powerful, but we are not to be trifled with. The warriors were all talking at once, wanting to prove their bravery. As the saying goes, there is no first in literature and no second in martial arts. In the army, it was very normal for divisions and soldiers to compete with each other. These warriors were from an old army, like the Dragonxiang army. Naturally, their tempers were bigger. Other than the divine martial guards, there was probably no other troop that could convince the soldiers wholeheartedly. Seeing this, the old man shook his head and did not say anything. A trace of reminiscence flashed in his eyes. Back then, he was also hot-blooded and warlike, going through fire and water with the Marquis. It's good to be young. It was unknown whether it was a sigh or reminiscence, but it drifted in the cold wind of the night. At the place where the story happened, at the huge hole in the wall, the sound of banging could still be heard until late at night. Under the instructions of the great General Bai Qi, the engineers of the various divisions were working overnight to repair the wall. They wanted to plug the huge hole in one night. Beyond the wall, rows of barracks could be seen. Mulan Fortress was a military fortress. The buildings in the fortress naturally had a strong military style. The barracks were neatly built and looked very pleasing to the eye. Because it was built on a mountain, there was an abundance of stone. Coupled with the needs of war, the buildings in the fortress were mainly made of stone, with green bricks and green tiles. As for wood, it was a rare material in the fortress. The entire fortress was built in a military style. It was tough, simple, and practical. Even the commercial and residential areas of the fortress were no exception. The most eye-catching building in the fortress was naturally the Dragonxiang Army headquarters. The headquarters was not an ordinary courtyard. Instead, it was a 5-story stone tower. Standing at the top of the stone tower and looking north, one would be able to have a panoramic view of the northern wilderness. Bai Qi's office was located on this floor. This place naturally became the command center of the entire army. It was dark outside, but Bai Qi's room was still brightly lit. Those who were familiar with Bai Qi knew that this officer was a workaholic through and through. It was late at night, and the entire base was quiet. At this moment, a series of footsteps sounded in the corridor, breaking the silence of the night. After a while, an officer from the military intelligence department walked into Bai Qi's room and bowed. "General, how is it?" Did he confess? Bai Qi was buried in his desk, writing today's battle report. He was preparing to submit it to the Marquis, who was thousands of miles away. Seeing the intelligence officer walk in, Bai Qi put down his brush and looked up. No, this person is extremely stubborn. No matter how we tortured him, he refused to say a word. The stubborn person that the intelligence officer was referring to was naturally Li Xiuqing, who was captured during the day. What a tough nut to crack. I did not do my job well. Please punish me, General. Bai Qi did not speak much, but he scared the intelligence officer. He naturally understood that the general was dissatisfied with the results of the interrogation. If he was dissatisfied with the results, it meant that he was dissatisfied with the military intelligence department and the intelligence officer. Thinking of this, the young intelligence officer's forehead began to break out in cold sweat. In the entire Dragon Xiang army, there were over 70,000 soldiers who feared General Bai Qi from the bottom of their hearts. Even peerless generals like Yi Lai and Shi Wan Sui felt uneasy in front of Bai Qi and did not dare to act presumptuously. It was not that Bai Qi was brave, but that he was ruthless. In the Battle of Zhaoqing, Bai Qi's ruthlessness not only scared the enemy, but also intimidated his subordinates. I did not say that I would punish you. Bai Qi waved his hand. If that is the case, then keep this person in custody for the time being. Yes, sir. To be continued. Chapter 504. Ouyang Shuo first picked up the ancient bottle and opened it. There was a drop of blood in the bottle. Demon God Blood Essence. After consumption, the complete version of the Demon God's bloodline will be activated. It seemed that the Qiyu blood essence that Ouyang Shuo had obtained before was really only a half-finished Demon God's bloodline. Heaven never bars one's way. With this, the hidden danger of his bloodline could be completely eliminated. Ouyang Shuo capped the bottle and carefully put it in his storage bag. Then he picked up Chiyo's axe. Name: Heaven-Splitting Axe, Divine Weapon. Hardness: 90 Sharpness, 88 Toughness, 75 Characteristics. Edge Breaker: when a weapon's hardness is lower than the Heaven-Splitting Axe, there is a certain chance that the weapon will be cut in half by the Heaven-Splitting Axe. Unique item: cannot be dropped. Ultimate skill: Pangu Splitting the Heavens, releases a strong, murderous aura, as if it was splitting the heavens and the earth. All enemies in front of it will be split in half and turned into powder. Cooldown time: 1 week. Limitation: only mountain barbarians can equip it. Evaluation: Chiyu used the legend of Pangu to split the heavens and forged it with the 9th Heaven Red Copper. Unsurprisingly, Chiyo's Heaven-Splitting Axe was a rare divine weapon. Unfortunately, the Heaven-Splitting Axe turned out to be a limited equipment. Only mountain barbarians could use it. Finally, there was the booklet. Name: Helm Massacre Scripture, Emperor-Level Technique. Level 1/level 12 Attributes. For each level up, Root +1, Comprehension +1, all acquired attributes +1, Limitation. Only mountain barbarians can practice it. Evaluation: Demon God Chiyo's main technique, including internal cultivation methods, combat skills, and other comprehensive techniques. There is also a race limitation. Ouyang Shuo saw this and shook his head regretfully. It seemed that the Heaven-Splitting Axe and the Helm Massacre Scripture should be used together. It was enough to make a mountain barbarian warrior into a peerless general. The first person Ouyang Shuo thought of was Shirhu. Shirhu had contributed greatly to subduing the mountain barbarians this time. It could be said that he had gotten what he deserved this time. After looking through the 3 items, Ouyang Shuo immediately ordered people to make a temporary coffin and put Chiyo's corpse in it before choosing a place to bury it. Apart from that, Ouyang Shuo also ordered his men to take care of Wei Zhang's corpse. Shanghai City's martial temple enshrined 2 king-level general souls. Thus, so long as he returned to Shanghai City, Ouyang Shuo would be able to consume a general soul to revive Wei Zhang. After everything was settled, Ouyang Shuo returned to the command center. Ouyang Shuo ordered Qin Dameng to inform all the generals that the meeting will be held at 8 p.m. But before that, no one was allowed to disturb him. In the quiet room, Ouyang Shuo took out the small bottle containing the blood essence of the Fiend God and carefully swallowed it. As the Fiend God blood essence entered his stomach, the blood vessels in Ouyang Shuo's body that had just calmed down began to boil again, emitting cheers of joy. Thump, thump! Ouyang Shuo could feel that his heart was beating faster. It was beating 5 to 6 times a second. A normal person's heart rate would only beat once or twice per second. As Ouyang Shuo's heart beat faster, The blood in his body started to circulate faster. After a while, the demon god blood essence merged with the blood in his body, and there was no longer any distinction between them. Suddenly, a vast amount of blood energy erupted from Ouyang Shua's body. Chun Damong, who was guarding outside the door, could feel the blood energy emitting from the room. He could not help but be shocked and took several steps back. Ouyang Shua's entire body was covered in blood. The surging blood energy began to transform Ouyang Shua's body. Previously, Ouyang Shua had faintly felt that the shackles of his blood vessels, under the impact of this blood energy, immediately turned into bubbles with a crack. In an instant, Ouyang Shua felt a joy that came from the deepest part of his blood vessels. It was as if the level of his life had changed. He had broken free from the shackles and seen the light of day again. Black filth seeped out from Ouyang Shua's pores, giving off an unpleasant stench. Ouyang Shua was once again reborn. Under the cleansing of the blood energy, the blood in Ouyang Shua's body flowed unceasingly. His entire blood seemed to have turned into a viscous liquid. It was incomparably viscous and had reached the realm of blood refining mercury paste. Upon reaching this realm, Ouyang Shua's blood energy became even more powerful. His physical body's healing ability also improved further. Thus, the strength of his entire body grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. Ouyang Shua's physical strength increased to the strength of 4 bulls in an instant. What was even more terrifying was that his skin became tougher and tougher, like a layer of copper. His bones also became harder and harder, and the hematopoietic function of his bone marrow increased exponentially. Copper skin and iron bones were indestructible. The secret of Qi Yu's transformation originated from this. The surging blood energy was the source of all of Qi Yu's strength. After being cleansed by the blood energy, Ouyang Shua's body experienced a transformation from the inside to the outside. From now on, Ouyang Shua would even be able to fight against a fierce general like Shirwan Sui. The benefits did not stop there. Under the influence of the blood energy, the inner cannon of the yellow arch that Ouyang Shua cultivated absorbed enough energy and advanced to the 9th level in an instant. Just this alone saved him several months of bitter cultivation. It was truly a double blessing. After the inner cannon of the yellow arch leveled up, the strength of Ouyang Shua's physical body improved again. He now possessed the strength of 5 bulls. In a short period of time, Ouyang Shua's strength nearly doubled. One punch was enough to split mountains and split rocks. At this moment, the blood in Ouyang Shua's body gradually calmed down. At this moment, a system notification sounded in Ouyang Shua's ears. System notification. Congratulations to player who says that has no clothes. After consuming the demon god's blood essence, the demon god's bloodline in the body has been stimulated and the first awakening has been completed. Special reward, 20,000 reputation points. What followed was actually a system notification. System notification. Congratulations to player who says that has no clothes. She has become the first person in the China region to complete the awakening of the bloodline. Special reward. A Pei-Yuan pill and 40,000 reputation points. Congratulations to player. With a swoosh, a white light flashed. A small white porcelain bottle suddenly appeared in Ouyang Shua's hand. In the bottle, there was a red pill the size of a soybean. Pei-Yuan pill strengthens the foundation and has a miraculous effect on heavily injured people. Ouyang Shua kept the Pei-Yuan pill into his storage bag. His eyebrows were tightly knitted and his expression was solemn. There were many suspicious points about this turn of events. Firstly, it seemed to Ouyang Shua that it was a normal awakening of the bloodline. Why would Gaia specially send out a system notification? It was already somewhat unusual. Gaia was not some goody two-shoes. If it wasn't something that would affect the game, he would definitely not send out a system notification. Once it was announced, it could only mean that the bloodline awakening was unusual. Secondly, the system notification's explanation was also very mysterious. According to Gaia's explanation, Ouyang Shua consuming the demon god's blood essence was not to change his bloodline, but to stimulate the bloodline that was originally hidden in the depths of his body. From this, Ouyang Shua thought of the scene when he broke the bloodline shackles. In other words, the demon god's blood essence was only a guide. Like a catalyst, it helped the demon god's bloodline that was originally hidden in his bloodline to go from a hidden state to an awakened state. When did Ouyang Shua become a descendant of the demon god? Ouyang Shua clearly remembered that when he created the game character, there was no race. He was directly recognized as a human, and there was no such thing as bloodline. Moreover, this was only the first awakening. In other words, when the opportunity arrived in the future, it was possible to stimulate a second or even a third awakening. What kind of secrets were hidden in the human bloodline? To what extent had Gaia's research on bloodlines reached? Were these just the game settings, or were they closely related to reality? Everything was a cloud of mystery. Just as Ouyang Shua had previously lamented, he now stood at a higher position and could see a corner of the truth of the world. However, he became even more confused because there were too many mysteries that troubled him. Swordsman City. As soon as the system notification came out, the other players were baffled. Only Feng Qingyang's face was ashen. As the successor of an ancient martial arts family, Feng Qingyang had a more thorough understanding of martial arts, bloodline, and other settings in the game than others, including Di Chun and the others. Since the beginning of the game, Feng Qingyang had known the secret of bloodline and had been working hard to awaken the bloodline in his body. He didn't expect that Yu Wui would snatch it away from him again. What kind of dog *T luck does this guy have? Feng Qingyang had no interest in fighting for supremacy. The only thing he cared about was bloodline. At the moment when Ouyang Shua's bloodline awakened, the body in Ouyang Shua's game cabin in the huge immigration fleet that was sailing in the dark universe also started to mutate. Waves of red blood mist enveloped Ouyang Shua's entire body. Endless high-grade nutrient solution was injected into Ouyang Shua's body through the nutrient solution pipeline. In the end, the red blood mist actually condensed into a blood nest. In a huge blood nest, Ouyang Shua's powerful heartbeat could be vaguely heard. At the same time, the command center of the fleet, where the Gaia mainframe was located, flashed a series of instructions. Beat. Detected that flight ship ZGD-105, game cabin ZG-1005-0078, has triggered Federation Clause number 31 and completed the first high-level bloodline awakening. It has reached the sea-level monitoring condition. Commander, please confirm. Confirm. Confirmation complete. According to Federation Clause number 31-004, game cabin ZG-100-50078 is granted the highest level of nutrient solution. The game cabin's artificial intelligence level will be upgraded, and the citizen's personal authority will be upgraded. B. The highest level nutrient solution pipeline is connected. Game cabin ZG-100-50078's artificial intelligence level has been upgraded. The citizen will be monitored 24/7 to ensure his safety. Citizen ZG-35082521681005827's personal authority will be upgraded to sea level. Chapter 505. After awakening his bloodline, Ouyang Shua was covered in dirt. After washing up, Ouyang Shua got up and went to the medical room to see the seriously injured Shi Wansui. Chio's shocking attack had knocked Shi Wansui unconscious, and he had yet to wake up. The accompanying military doctor could only bandage Shi Wansui's wounds and stop the external injuries. The military doctors in the Shanghai City Army, especially the military doctors assigned to the first rank of the army, were all elites trained by the official medical bureau. Some of them were even players, but in reality, they were surgeons. Therefore, although Shi Wansui's external injuries were frightening, it was not a problem for the military doctors. As for the internal injuries, they could not do anything. They could only wait for Shi Wansui to wake up and heal himself. Of course, there was still a risk. If Wan Sui did not wake up and his internal injuries were delayed for too long, he would be left with a lifelong disease. Perhaps even his martial arts would be destroyed. For a fierce general like Wan Sui, once his martial arts were destroyed, it was no different from suicide. Seeing this, Ouyang Shua took out the foundation pill from his storage bag without hesitation and handed it to the military doctor, telling him to give it to Wan Sui. The foundation pill could consolidate the foundation and had a miraculous effect on seriously injured people. As expected, after Wan Sui took the foundation pill, his complexion immediately improved. There was a trace of color on his pale face. The military doctor felt Wan Sui's pulse and said, "Marquis, don't worry. General is fine." Ouyang Shua nodded. "Take good care of him." Then he turned and left. The war had just ended, and there were still many things waiting for him to handle. After returning from the medical room, Ouyang Shua summoned Hu to the main hall. "Greetings, Marquis." Although Ouyang Shua was now the barbarian king, Hu still addressed him as Marquis in the army. This barbarian soldier had been trained by a great wizard, so his IQ and EQ were both first-rate. On Hu, he had the simple and honest nature of the barbarian tribe and the adaptability of the Han people. These two different personalities mixed together, forming Hu's unique character. Electing Ouyang Shua as king was Hu's most beautiful performance. "Rise." Ouyang Shua sat in the seat of honor. On the tea table in front of him was a battle axe and a small booklet. They were the heaven-splitting axe and the hell-slaughtering scripture that Chiyu had dropped. When Hu heard this, he sat down below and looked straight ahead. "Do you recognize these two items?" Ouyang Shua pointed at the tomahawk and the booklet on the table as he asked with a smile. "Yes." When Chiyu's corpse was collected, Hu was at the side, so he naturally recognized these two items. This was especially true for the heaven-splitting axe. That was Chiyu's symbol, and also the weapon that the barbarian warriors yearned for even in their dreams. "Now they are yours." Ouyang Shua played it down, but Hu's heart trembled when he heard it. His heartbeat couldn't help but quicken, and his heart almost jumped to his throat. For a moment, he was speechless. "What? You don't like it?" This beloved general of his was sometimes too well-behaved, so well-behaved that Ouyang Shua couldn't help but tease him. "Marquis, this is too precious." Hu still hadn't come to his senses. "Take it. This is what you deserve." Ouyang Shua stood up and stuffed the two items into Hu's hands. "Thank you for the reward, Marquis." Seeing this, Hu once again knelt on one knee and bowed respectfully. Ouyang Shua nodded and returned to his seat. He said, "I don't need to tell you the significance and weight of these two items. I'm sure you know very well. I only hope that you won't bring disgrace to their prestige." "Yes." Hu nodded his head vigorously, his face flushed. Of course, he knew that holding the heaven-splitting axe meant that he had ascended to the throne of the #1 warrior of the barbarian tribe. However, whether he could sit firmly on the throne and not be gossiped about by others would depend on his own ability. The Marquis could give him a weapon, but he couldn't help him block off the gossip. The barbarian tribe originally held martial strength in high esteem. Everything depended on one's fist. When the time is right, I will also teach the hell-slaughtering scripture to Bao and Lei Jingtian. Ouyang Shua didn't plan to be like Chiyu, who treasured it and cultivated it alone. Of course, the hell-slaughtering scripture was an emperor-level technique after all. It naturally had extremely high requirements for a warrior's aptitude and comprehension. Not every barbarian warrior could cultivate it. Ouyang Shua also didn't want the hell-slaughtering scripture to become so widespread. Understood. The Marquis mentioning Bao and Lei Jingtian was also a warning to him not to be arrogant and complacent. There were other outstanding barbarian generals behind him. Ouyang Shua would definitely put the barbarian generals in important positions after taking in the barbarians. It was most appropriate for the barbarian troops to be led by the barbarian generals. Withdraw. You still need to pay more attention to the barbarian army. Although the barbarians had surrendered and respected Ouyang Shua as their king, they had still lost the battle and suffered consecutive setbacks. They couldn't help but lose control of their emotions. They didn't want to cause any big trouble. The situation was urgent. This battle couldn't be like the Battle of Zhaoqing, where they had a full month to reorganize. Ouyang Shuo planned to break camp and set out in 2 days. Understood. Shi nodded again and withdrew. After Shi left, Ouyang Shuo finally had time to read the battle reports sent by the Black Snake Guards. Central Plains. Wandering Huan and Lord Xuanxin's 2 armies advanced side by side, but they were met with the stubborn attacks of Zhang Chu's army. The momentum of the 2 armies' attacks had been completely stopped. The entire battlefield had turned into a stalemate. It was hard to determine victory or defeat. It was reported that Di Chun was already restless in the north, ready to lead his troops south at any time. Thus, the situation in the Central Plains was still very uncertain. It was hard to determine victory or defeat in a short period of time. Southeast. Xiongba and Battle Wolf's pincer attack from the north and south had put Huang Chao in a difficult position. After all, he had already lost to Battle Wolf once. Huang Chao had already lost his drive. Coupled with the lack of soldiers and generals, Great Qi's decline was already showing. According to the analysis of the Black Snake Guards intelligence station in Jianya, if the battle in the southeast went smoothly, it was very likely that victory or defeat would be decided within a month. Battle Wolf and Xiongba were both opponents that couldn't be underestimated. One was maturing day by day, and his military talent was becoming more and more prominent. The other was an old fox, ambitious and ruthless. When the 2 of them joined forces, it was indeed enough to give Huang Chao a headache. In comparison, the Siege Lion and the Dragon Seeking Acupoint, who were both from the southeast, seemed a little overshadowed. After all, among the commoner lords, not everyone could be like Ouyang Shuo, who could strategize and determine victory from 1,000 miles away. What made Ouyang Shuo even more disappointed was that the coalition army of the Siege Lion had not yet crossed the border. They had always been observing. It was not that the Siege Lion did not want to advance, but that his allies did not want to take this risk. Obviously, the Siege Lion's control over the Jiangchuan province was not just weak. As for the Dragon Seeking Acupoint of the South Min province, because there was a province in between, he was completely a spectator. Ouyang Shuo had already instructed the Dragon Seeking Acupoint of the South Min province to simply give up hope on the battle in the southeast and lead his troops to reinforce Lingxi City, where Baihua was. Ouyang Shuo was also a hero who cut his losses. This war that affected the whole world had exposed the weakness of the alliance of mountains and seas. After this war, the prestige of the alliance of mountains and seas in the China region would probably suffer a setback and would no longer be as glorious as before. On the contrary, the Yin-Huang alliance, after a period of dormancy, had the momentum to make a comeback. In the southwest region, facing the 200,000-strong army of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, even with the help of Luo Shixin's division, the army of Lingxi City was beaten back again and again. In just a week, they had lost 4 cities in a row. In the middle of the war, Baihua had no choice but to ask her big brother, Bright Moon Illuminates the River, to mobilize more than 20,000 top adventurer professional players from the Breeze Pavilion to join the battlefield and assist in the defense of the territory. Once the players died, their levels would be reset to 0 and all their items would be dropped. The players of the Breeze Pavilion were all elites. After 2 years of training, it was not easy to get to where they were today. To persuade them to join the meat grinder of the battlefield, who knew how much hard work Baihua and Bright Moon Illuminates the River had put in behind the scenes. Just the compensation for the deaths of the players would probably empty the treasury of Lingxi City. Baihua had really been forced to the edge of the cliff and had completely thrown caution to the wind. In his previous life, Baihua had probably used this trump card as well. Of course, because Shanghai City did not exist in his previous life, the situation of Lingxi City was much better than now. They were able to gather a group of allies and were not as isolated and helpless as this time. Ouyang Shuo remembered that in his previous life, the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom did not cause much bloodshed in the southwest region. In this life, it had to be said that the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom could be so arrogant because of Ouyang Sha. It was precisely because of Ouyang Shua's deliberate indulgence that such a monster was raised. This time, Bai Hua had taken the blame for Ouyang Shua. In this regard, Ouyang Shua felt somewhat apologetic. Because of this, he had readily sent Luo Shixin's division to reinforce Lingxi City. At the same time, he had personally persuaded the Dragon Point-seeking guild to go on an expedition. The teleportation fees of the Dragon Point-seeking guild were all funded by Ouyang Shua. Fortunately, with the support of the adventurer players and the Dragon Point-seeking guild, Lingxi City had temporarily stabilized its defense line, and the army of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom did not invade its hinterland. This was also the first time that adventurer players had participated in a territorial war on a large scale. It was just unknown what kind of chain effect the demonstration of the Breeze Pavilion would have on the future structure of the China region. At the very least, the various lords would pay more attention to the guilds of the players. Looking at the battle report, Ouyang Shua's brows relaxed. It should be said that with the end of the Wuzhou battle, the most difficult time for the Shanghai alliance had also ended. After getting rid of Qiu's army, and especially after Ouyang Shua was unexpectedly conferred the title of Barbarian King, the strength of the army of Shanghai City did not decrease, but instead increased. At this time, no matter how Shanghai City planned, it would be easy. It was precisely because of this that Ouyang Shua had to raise his tent overnight to discuss the next military operation. To be continued. Chapter 506. At 8 o'clock in the evening, Ouyang Shua entered the tent to discuss matters. Apart from Shi Hu and Shanju, those who attended the military meeting were all commanders of the division. Of the two, one represented the 1st Division of the Dragon Xiang Army, the other represented the 3rd Division of the Tiger Army. Before the meeting, Han Xin first reported the losses of the battle. In this battle, including the important personnel, our army lost a total of 21,500 soldiers. Among them, the 2nd Division of the Leopard Tau Army suffered the most. Not only did they lose more than half of their soldiers, even the division commander Wei Zhang was sacrificed. When the generals heard this, there was a moment of silence. In this battle, the army of Shanghai City could be said to have suffered heavy losses. More than 80% of the soldiers who died were from the Leopard Tau Army. In the battle against the Qiyu Blood Guards, the 3,000 Divine Martial Guards also suffered heavy losses, losing more than 700 people. On the other hand, the Imperial Guard Division, including the reinforcements of Shi Wansui Division and the Mountain Pillar Division, suffered negligible losses. In the army of 100,000 barbarians, apart from those who were seriously injured and those who died in battle, a total of more than 71,000 people have surrendered and are waiting to be reorganized. This is the calculation of the losses. As for how to reorganize, please tell me, Marquis. As Han Xin spoke, he bowed to Ouyang Shua and returned to his seat. In the Battle of Wu Province, Shanghai City had lost more than 20,000 soldiers and captured more than 70,000 elite barbarian soldiers. In other words, after this battle, Shanghai City had gained another 50,000 new soldiers. Of course, if Ouyang Shua had not been conferred the title of Barbarian King, these barbarian soldiers would not have obediently surrendered. If they did not escape, they would have been executed for resisting. Ouyang Shua nodded his head and looked around at the generals in the hall. He said in a low voice, "The Battle of Wu Province has ended, but there is still an even larger battle ahead waiting for us. Generals, do not slack off." "Yes." The generals responded in unison, their expressions solemn. Mountain Pillar. Ouyang Shua directly began to call out the generals. Here, Mountain Pillar did not think that he would be the first to be called out. "I order you to lead the 3rd Division of the Tiger Army and set off tomorrow to meet up with the army at the Lingnan War Zone. After handing over the troops to General Chao Guwei, return to Shanghai City and report to the Military Affairs Office." The Tiger Brave Army had already been assigned to the Lingnan War Zone. Since the Battle of Wuzhou had ended, Ouyang Shua naturally had to let Chao Gui's division return to strengthen the defenses of the eastern side of his territory. As for Shan Zhu, he was Ouyang Shua's choice for the regiment commander of the Armored Beast Regiment. According to Du Ruhui's letter, thanks to the efforts of Xiao Ying, the director of the Annals and Pastors Bureau, the breeding of the ironback beasts in the Ironback Valley in Xiongzhou County had gradually taken shape and could begin to be deployed in the army. The Logistics Division was already organizing the armor workshop to tailor armor for the iron-armored beasts. An iron armor beast equipped with a full set of armor would be a terrifying existence on the battlefield. Shan Zhu was from a Li tribe, so he knew the habits of the ironback beast the best. He was also a fierce general, so he was the most suitable candidate for the Ironback Beast Division. The soldiers of the Ironclad Beast Division were chosen from the barbarian warriors. Yes, sir. Shan Zhu's heart was filled with doubts. It was not strange that the Marquis wanted him to lead his troops back to the Southern Ridge battlefront. What was strange was why he wanted to return to Shanghai City alone. Shan Zhu could only keep all of this in his stomach. Other than letting go of Chao Yuan's division, Ouyang Shua focused on reorganizing the Leopard Army. The entire Leopard Army had a shortage of nearly 20,000 soldiers. How to make up for it was a difficult problem. Ouyang Shua decided to reorganize a barbarian heavy infantry division from the barbarian prisoners of war and put it under Zhang Han's command. The original soldiers under Zhang Han's command were transferred to other divisions. Other than that, Shi Wansui's division retained 2 brigades, and the remaining soldiers were also incorporated into the Leopard Army. In this way, the soldiers of the Leopard Army were basically restored. The remaining gap could only be filled after the attack on the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. Moreover, with such a reorganization, the soldiers of the Leopard Army were either elite barbarian warriors or the veterans of Shi Wansui's division. In addition, the soldiers had been tempered by the Battle of Wuzhou. The strength of the Leopard Army also did not decline, but increased, growing into a mature army. Shi Wansui was seriously injured in this battle. Even if he took the essence-enhancing pill, he only woke up temporarily. For him to truly recover, he would need to rest for at least a month. This was equivalent to saying that Shi Wansui's division had temporarily lost its main commander. Therefore, Ouyang Shua simply promoted the commander of the 2nd Brigade of Shi Wansui's division, Jiang Kai, to vice commander. The division led by Jiang Kai brought Shi Wansui and Wei Zhang's corps along the secret path of the 100,000 Mountains back to Lianzhou County, and then stationed at Mulan Fortress. Returning with Jiang Kai were 3 brigades of barbarian warriors. These barbarian warriors were reorganized into the Evil Coming Division. The Evil Coming Division previously only had 2 barbarian heavy infantry brigades. This time, Ouyang Shua made up for it in one go, forming a pure barbarian heavy infantry division. The 3 brigades replaced by the Evil Coming Division just happened to be incorporated into Shi Wansui's division. In this way, the 3 armies of Shanghai City were completely separated, no longer fighting together. The Dragon Soaring Army was stationed at the headquarters of the Mulan Fortress. The Tiger Bright Army was stationed at the Lingnan War Zone, and the Leopard Army was temporarily stationed at Wuzhou County. After a round of reorganization, the remaining 50,000 barbarian warriors were reorganized by Ouyang Shua into 4 barbarian independent divisions. The specific designation would be determined after the war. Of course, one of the divisions was prepared for the Iron Armored Beast Division that was still under construction. However, it was wartime now, so Ouyang Shua still brought this division with him to deal with the threat of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. Of the 4 division commanders, other than Shi, who was appointed as the commander of the 1st Barbarian Independent Division, the remaining 3 divisions were temporarily taken over by the generals of the Divine Martial Guards. The commander of the army was also temporarily taken over by Ouyang Shua. Ouyang Shua did this because he had no other choice. After all, the barbarians had just submitted. Other than Ouyang Shua, it was very difficult for anyone to suppress this group of fellows. However, the barbarian warriors were the best choice for heavy infantry. Naturally, Ouyang Shua was not stupid enough to completely disperse the barbarian warriors and put them into the various divisions. The organized, barbarian heavy infantry division was the most frightening. The two division commanders that were put into the army were Wu Lai. He had led the barbarian troops for a long time and was very compatible with the soldiers. It was not too big of a problem for him to suppress the new members. As for Zhang Han, this famous general, although he was quiet, he was actually a ruthless person. His methods were also very sharp. Otherwise, he would not have trained a group of moutly prisoners into a strong army. It was precisely because of this that Ouyang Shuo was at ease to let Zhang Han lead a barbarian heavy infantry division. If it were other generals, including Di Qing, Ouyang Shuo would not be completely at ease. After the reorganization, Ouyang Shuo held two large corps in his hands. In addition to the Imperial Guard Division and the 4 barbarian independent divisions, he had more than 200,000 elite soldiers. This time, Ouyang Shuo wanted to see how arrogant the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom could be. The next day, Shanzhu and Jiangkai led their respective troops and left. Han Xian led the Leopard Tau Corps and stayed at the headquarters for 2 days. The first was to complete the reorganization of the army, and the second was to deal with the aftermath. 2 days later, Han Xian would lead the Leopard Tau Corps to the west. Together with the Dragon Xian Corps, they would form a pincer attack on the southern army of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom outside the Mulan Fortress. As for Ouyang Shuo, he would lead the Divine Martial Guards, the Imperial Guard Division, and the 4 barbarian independent divisions to Qiyu City to announce the birth of a new king. The end of the Wuzhou battle did not mean that Wuzhou County was already under the rule of Shanghai City. At the very least, Ouyang Shuo had to think of a way to obtain the recognition of the various barbarian tribes. After all, only the barbarian soldiers would witness the coronation of Ouyang Shuo. The other barbarian clansmen, especially those living in Qiyu City, would not be seen. Therefore, Ouyang Shuo wanted to announce his existence as quickly as possible to prevent any unexpected changes. This time, Ouyang Shuo brought the Divine Martial Guards and the Imperial Guard Division to prevent any accidents. With such a trump card in his hands, even if there were any changes in Qiyu City, Ouyang Shuo would have the confidence to deal with it. Other than that, the governance of Wuzhou County was also a big problem. Different from Liezhou County and Zhaoqing County, the ruling class of Wuzhou County were the barbarians. The Han people in the county had always been in a position of oppression. There had always been a very deep conflict between the two races. To subdue Wuzhou County this time, how to balance the interests of the two was a big problem. If the authority of the barbarians was removed in one go, it would definitely cause a backlash. But if the status of the Han people in the county was not restored, the economy of Wuzhou County would not be able to develop. Although Qiyu governed Wuzhou County like an iron bucket, Ouyang Shuo really did not dare to compliment his achievements in the economy. It was simply a mess. The entire Wuzhou County was a terrible mess. The economy of the county was probably no different from that of a primitive society. Therefore, to bring Wuzhou County back on the right track, there was a long and arduous road ahead. The most important thing was to choose a qualified county governor. This county governor needed to have a firm hand and be able to suppress the barbarians, but also have flexible political wisdom and be able to balance the interests of the barbarians and the Han people. Other than that, he also needed to have a certain degree of economic acumen and be able to revitalize the economy of Wuzhou County. Last night, Ouyang Shuo had already sent letters to Xiao He and Fan Zhongyan, appointing Fan Zhongyan as the county governor of Wuzhou County. At this time, only Duke Fan could take on this heavy responsibility. The position of chief of the administrative bureau left behind by Fan Zhongyan was naturally filled by Xiao He. The official examination led by the administrative bureau would also continue to be presided over by Xiao He and would not be interrupted. Before Fan Zhongyan led the officials to take over Wuzhou County, Ouyang Shuo had to personally oversee Qiyu City. The battle on the side of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom was watched over by the two divine generals, by Qi and Han Xian. Ouyang Shuo always remembered his identity. He was the Lord. Stabilizing the rule under his rule was his first task. Matters of leading troops to battle were best left to the generals to handle. To be continued. Chapter 507. P.S. Congratulations to Ji Inghu for being promoted to sect leader. I will add another chapter when the time is right. Thank you. Red clouds hung overhead, and the north wind was biting cold. Ouyang Shuo led his troops through the wilderness, experiencing the different customs and practices of Wuzhou County. When they passed by Demon King's slope, they could faintly smell the fragrance of osmanthus in the air. In this desolate wilderness, such a strange fragrance really made one's mind shake, and it made one feel refreshed. Where is this? In reply to the marquis, this hill is where Chiyo's troops were stationed. Is there an osmanthus tree on the mountain? Yes, there is an entire osmanthus forest at the top. It is very spectacular. But the climate of the wilderness has changed recently, and the newly bloomed osmanthus flowers have all withered overnight. Ouyang Shuo heard this and looked at the top of the mountain in silence, his expression unfathomable. After a long time, Ouyang Shuo spoke again. Since this is where Chiyo's troops were stationed, and there are osmanthus flowers accompanying it, it can be considered a treasured land. Let's bury Chiyu at the top of the mountain. Originally, Ouyang Shuo planned to bring Chiyu back to Chiyu City for burial, but he changed his mind at the last minute. Yes. The army stopped and held a simple funeral for Chiyu at the top of the mountain. As soon as the funeral ended, Ouyang Shuo heard the sound of a system notification. System notification. Congratulations to player not saying you for burying the leader of the mountain barbarians, Chiyu. Your benevolence has moved the mountain barbarians. The loyalty of all mountain barbarians has increased by 10 points. Ouyang Shuo heard this and let out a long sigh. Due to Chiyo's encounter, Ouyang Shuo could not help but sigh. In the great struggle for supremacy in the wilderness, an individual's combat power was ultimately limited. If he wanted to achieve anything, he needed the assistance of capable people. Although Ouyang Shuo's martial strength was constantly improving, his heart was as firm as iron. He would not be blinded by personal bravery. A cool breeze blew, carrying away Ouyang Shuo's sigh and the fragrance of the osmanthus. The army set off, and Demon King's slope quieted down again. From then on, every year in the 10th month of autumn, the osmanthus flowers at Demon King's slope would always bloom abnormally, and the fragrance would spread for 5 miles, becoming a famous scenic spot. Who knew that the demon god of a generation was resting here? Gaia Year 2. The 25th day of the 10th month, Chiyu City. After 4 days of marching, Ouyang Shuo and the others finally arrived outside Chiyu City. A day ago, Sher had already led the vanguard and rushed to Chiyu City ahead of time to announce the result of the Battle of Wuzhou to the entire city. When they heard that their leader Chiyu had died in battle, that the great army had been wiped out, the mountain barbarian tribes in the city were silent for a moment, and then they erupted into an uproar. Especially when Ouyang Shuo was crowned as the barbarian king. It caused a huge uproar in the city. All the astonishment converged into one sentence. Chiyu City is going to change. At that time, there were people causing trouble in the city, but they were firmly suppressed by Shihu's iron fist. As the vanguard, Shihu's duty was to ensure that Chiyu City would be under the rule of Shanghai City before the marquis arrived. There must be no second voice in the city. Otherwise, it would be his dereliction of duty as a vanguard official. Of course, there were also people in the city who were happy. At the very least, the Han people in Chiyu City were overjoyed, but they did not dare to show it in front of the mountain barbarians. The powerful rule of the mountain barbarians over the past year had already left a shadow in the hearts of the Han people. At the south gate of Chiyu City, the clan leaders of the mountain barbarian tribes, as well as some core figures, had been organized by Shihu early in the morning. They lined up neatly on both sides of the city gate, respectfully awaiting Ouyang Shuo's arrival. According to the concept of ancient cities, the south gate was the gate with the highest status. The south gate of the capital was even more so called the gate of the country. The Great Bright Gate of the Ming dynasty and the Great Qing Gate of the Qing dynasty were both the South Gate. Ouyang Shuo, entering the city from the South Gate, was a clear oath. From now on, Ouyang Shuo was the new master of Qiyu City and even all of Wuzhou County. The clan leaders stood outside the city, enduring the cold wind. They did not dare to show any complaints on their faces, but they were full of complaints in their hearts. They did not really approve of Ouyang Shuo, the new king. But what could they do? The vanguard troops, led by Shi, who were armed with knives and axes. They had no choice. The great army in Qiyu City had been called away by Qiyu. What remained were some servant soldiers. How could they be a match for the vanguard troops? They had long obediently surrendered. In the hands of the various tribes in the city, there was no military power that could contend against Shi. Qiyu was also on guard against the various tribes. All the elite soldiers of the various tribes had been chosen to enter the army. The various large tribes were not allowed to keep private soldiers. Even so, they still held onto a sliver of hope. Perhaps this was a lie. Or perhaps, when the great army of the mountain barbarians returned, the clan leaders would only need to give the order to recall their soldiers. Unfortunately, when the mighty army appeared outside the city, the clan leaders were immediately dumbfounded. They saw Ouyang Shuo wearing the radiant armor and a scarlet cloak, riding the green beetle horse king in the midst of the strict military formation. He was escorted by the divine martial guards and the mountain barbarian soldiers as he slowly walked over. Without a doubt, this action already represented that the mountain barbarian soldiers of the various tribes had already acknowledged the rule of the barbarian king. Without soldiers in hand, reasoning could not be made clear. The faces of the clan leaders immediately became deathly pale, their hearts bitter. When he passed by the clan leaders, Ouyang Shuo did not dismount at all. He directly entered the city under the escort of the divine martial guards. The mighty army entered Qiyu City one after another. At this time, the Han people in the city finally confirmed a piece of news. The demon god, Qiyu, was really dead. The new ruler of Qiyu City was a marquis, and most importantly, he was a Han. Immediately, countless Han people walked to the streets, watching the grand scene of the army entering the city. From time to time, there were bursts of cheers, one louder than the other. This was the first time that Ouyang Shuo received such a warm welcome upon entering the city. The soldiers of the Divine Martial Guards and the Imperial Guard Division held their heads high, like heroes returning from victory. The mountain barbarians in the city, on the other hand, looked at this army with complicated expressions. There was confusion, but also awe. After entering the city, Ouyang Shuo immediately ordered Shi, who to lead 4 independent mountain barbarian regiments, to enter the military camp in the city. No one was allowed to enter or leave the military camp. Including the mountain barbarian soldiers, they were not allowed to contact their families. Ouyang Shuo did not want to give the various clans of the mountain barbarians a chance to contact their descendants. Who knew what kind of trouble those clan leaders would come up with? The defense of Qiyu City was completely taken over by the Imperial Guard Division. The guards of the city lore mansion were naturally all replaced by the Divine Martial Guards. In this way, no one could cause trouble in the city. Seeing Ouyang Shuo being so cautious, the expressions of the clan leaders, who had ulterior motives, became more and more unsightly. After everything was settled, Ouyang Shuo still did not receive the clan leaders. He was determined to leave them to the side. Instead, he ordered people to move the files of Wuzhou County to the study for him to read. The more he read, the angrier Ouyang Shuo became, and his expression became unsightly. Along the way, Ouyang Shuo already had a premonition of the terrible situation in Wuzhou County. The people of the various regions were destitute. The ruler of the mountain barbarians implemented a high-pressure policy, and the confrontation between the mountain barbarians and the Han people was serious. After reading the files, Ouyang Shuo was even more speechless. The entire Wuzhou County was not organized at all. It was completely like Qiyou's private territory. There were no professional officials in the various cities. There were only nobles of the various clans of the mountain barbarians who tyrannically abused their power. There was not even a decent industry in a county. Other than farming, it was mining and forging weapons and equipment. There was not the shadow of a single merchant. The total population of Wuzhou County was also the lowest among all the counties. It was roughly half of Lianzhou County. A large number of Han people had left their homes. They would rather become refugees again in order to escape Wuzhou County. The more Ouyang Shuo read, the angrier he became. He simply threw the files away. Out of sight, out of mind. This terrible mess was best left to Fan Zhongyan to clean up. The only thing that comforted Ouyang Shuo was probably the treasury in Chiyu City. Wuzhou County was backed by the 100,000 Great Mountains. In the mountains, the mountain barbarians had discovered 2 large gold mines. Because there was no business, Chiyu had no place to spend the gold coins that were mined. They were piled up messily in the treasury. A preliminary estimate was no less than 100,000 gold coins. The initial construction costs of Wuzhou County could be considered settled. The territory's financial income in the past few months had all been invested by Ouyang Shuo into the purchase of iron, ore, and coal. There was no excess funds to support the construction of Wuzhou County. Originally, Ouyang Shuo had already made preparations to borrow money to live. In Chiyo's room, Ouyang Shuo also found 2 books. One was called Julie Blood Domain True Scripture. It specifically described the training methods of the mountain barbarian blood guards. Ouyang Shuo hurriedly glanced at it and immediately closed it. The training methods described in the book were too cruel. It was practically against the harmony of the world. Ouyang Shuo could not bear to read on. After thinking for a while, Ouyang Shuo simply burned the Julie Blood Domain True Scripture. This kind of evil art should not be left in the world. It was better to burn it to avoid harming living beings. The other half of the book was called Julie 9 Forging Method. It described the forging techniques of the Julie tribe. The armor of the mountain barbarian army had its unique characteristics. They were all derived from this method. This was not bad. If he gave it to the combat readiness department, it should be a reference for the research and development of weapons and equipment in Shanghai City. Other than that, there were some miscellaneous items that were not worth mentioning. Strictly speaking, Chiyu is not a hedonist. The place where he lived was also extremely simple. There was nothing extravagant. Even his maidservants were extremely rare. The only shortcoming was probably that he was a little too cruel. According to the servants in the residence, when Chiyu came to the wilderness, he still liked to eat meat. Big chunks of beef, dripping with blood, were eaten raw. Ouyang Shuo was speechless when he heard that. After walking around the city lord's residence for a while, Ouyang Shuo got up and left. He decided to go to the courtyard where Chiyu trained the blood guards to take a look. Although the Julie Blood Domain True Scripture had been burned by Ouyang Shuo, he would not be satisfied if he did not take a look at the scene. Humans were curious. The entire courtyard was uninhabited within 100 meters of it. It was practically a forbidden area. Even if Chiyu led his troops away, no one dared to enter the courtyard to investigate. To be continued. Chapter 508. 25th of October, Chiyu City. Before Ouyang Shuo entered the courtyard where Chiyu blood guards were trained, the smell of blood permeated the air. "Open the door." Hearing this, the guard captain Chun Dameng strode forward and stomped on the wooden door. The wooden door shattered into pieces and scattered on the ground. He did not care about the lock on the door at all. How boorish! Ouyang Shuo shook his head and walked into the courtyard. The scene in front of him caused Ouyang Shuo's face to instantly turn pale. The inside of the courtyard was like an endless hell. Inside the courtyard, there were broken limbs everywhere. The walls of the courtyard were stained with blood and covered with red palm prints. Even the ground was dyed deep red by the blood. Countless flies and maggots were enjoying a rare feast in the courtyard. In a corner of the courtyard, there was a pool made of stone. It was 5 meters long and 3 meters wide. The strong smell of blood came from this pool. Walking closer, it turned out to be a huge pool of blood. It was bottomless, and countless bones were soaking in the pool. The whole pool was filled with bright red blood, and it was bubbling from time to time. Such a scene could only be found in hell. Ouyang Shuo recalled the records in the Julie Bloodfield Sutra and knew that the blood pool in front of him was the key to training the blood guards. Every day, the blood guards would soak in the pool to absorb blood energy. The bones in the pool must be the captured Han people who were forcibly refined by the blood pool and turned into nourishment for the blood pool. Such a large pool of blood. How many lives must have been sacrificed? Such a scene was intolerable by the heavens. Only a fiend god would act so unscrupulously, treating human lives as grass and the Han people in his territory as pigs and dogs for him to slaughter. Even Chen Dameng and the others turned pale upon seeing this, and had the urge to vomit. Open this place to the public for a day. After a day, burn it down. Ouyang Shuo's face was ashen. He no longer had the mood to watch and turned to leave. Yes, Chen Dameng responded with a heavy voice. His eyes were filled with anger. As Han people, seeing their own people being persecuted like this, no one would feel good in their heart. Once the secret of the courtyard was made public, it immediately caused a huge uproar in Chiyu City. Not to mention the Han people in the city, even the mountain barbarians who saw this scene were filled with grief and indignation. Because the severed limbs in the courtyard all belonged to the barbarian soldiers. Countless Han people and mountain barbarians who had lost their loved ones found their corpses in the courtyard. Each and every one of them cried their hearts out, making those who heard them shed tears. Chiyu's image took a nosedive. The chiefs of the mountain barbarians no longer dared to put on airs. One by one, they ran to the city lord's mansion and handed over their invitations, requesting to meet the Marquis of Lian Province and acknowledge his status as the barbarian king. Ouyang Shuo remained indifferent towards this. Ouyang Shuo was prepared to temper these mountain barbarian tribe leaders a little more. Rome was not built in a day. After returning to the city lord's estate, Ouyang Shuo was still unable to calm down. The scene of the blood pool kept replaying in his mind, unable to be erased. The cruelty of the wilderness was once again displayed in a bloody manner in front of Ouyang Shuo, striking at his nerves. Originally, Ouyang Shuo thought that he was sufficiently unfeeling and capable of facing all cruelty with composure. Who would have thought that Chiyu's actions would once again cross his bottom line? The cruelty of the wilderness was more violent than Ouyang Shuo had expected. The bones of the emperor were not just empty words. Ouyang Shuo could not help but ask himself, is he really prepared? Reporting to the Marquis, there is urgent military news. The arrival of the intelligence officer interrupted Ouyang Shuo's thoughts. Upon hearing this, Ouyang Shuo took the secret letter that the military intelligence department had just obtained from the courier station. The secret letter was sent by Bai Qi, reporting the latest battle situation in Mulan Fortress. Mulan Fortress. After half a month of meticulous preparation, the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom had sent countless siege weapons and rations to the southern barracks at the front line. Along with the rations, there was also a batch of secret weapons. In addition, Hong Xiuquan had once again sent another 50,000 soldiers from Tianjing to the southern barracks. He had also made a threat that he would take down Mulan Fortress at all costs. At this time, there were less than 40,000 soldiers stationed in Tianjing City. Everyone thought that Hong Xiuquan had gone crazy. In fact, Hong Xiuquan, who had been reborn, was not a brainless person. He had a secret weapon in his hands. He needed a port to realize his ambition. Therefore, even if he had to pay a huge price, Hong Xiuquan would take down Mulan Fortress and Lianzhou County. For this reason, he did not hesitate to cooperate with Chiyu to deal with the threat from the east. Hong Xiuquan's determination could not be shaken. The Southern Army of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom was formed by merging the previous Southern Army and Western Army. Together with the 50,000 soldiers sent by Tianjing, the total number of soldiers reached 200,000, which was comparable to the Western Army. The army was led by Yang Xiuqing, and the young General Li Xiuqing was the deputy general. In addition, there were two generals, Lin Fengxiang and Chen Yuqing, who served as the left and right generals respectively. This time, Hong Xiuquan was determined to take down Mulan Fortress and open up the estuary of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. On the 24th of October, the day before Ouyang Shuo led his troops to Chiyu City, the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's southern army stationed in front of Mulan Fortress finally launched the first wave of fierce attacks on Mulan Fortress. At this time, the defending troops of the fortress included the 3rd Division, the 4th Division, and the 5th Division of the Dragongxiang Legion. Apart from them, there was also the 1st Division of the City Guard Division, led by Zhao Sihu. As for the Lianzhou County Guard Division, they were still on standby in Mulan City. The Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's first wave of attack suffered an unprecedented heavy blow. Mulan Fortress was known as the #1 fortress of the southern border. Countless manpower, material, and financial resources were spent on it. It took almost half a year to build. How could it be easy? The 103 bow, 8 bull bed crossbows, and more than 50 catapults on the fortress gave the southern army of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom a head-on blow. Before the southern army could even get close to the foot of the city wall, the 50,000 vanguard troops were crushed by the rain of arrows and stones. The arrows shot by the 3 bow, 8 bull bed crossbows not only had a very long range, but also a large number of them. They were also very fast. They were like rows of human flesh harvesters. A total of 103 bow, 8 bull bed crossbows, in addition to 150 ordinary bed crossbows, were installed on the city walls, forming a dense defensive net. The sky was filled with arrows, just like a modern machine gun, pouring out bullets without stopping. In just one morning, the bed crossbows had used up more than 50,000 arrows. It was truly terrifying. Only Shanghai City, which was a large city with a large industry, could withstand such a huge arrow consumption. In addition to the bed crossbows, the catapults were also not to be outdone. The stones used in Mulan Fortress were all modified fireballs. The fierce fire oil that Ouyang Shuo had purchased crazily a year ago showed its power again. After being poured with the fierce fire oil and ignited, the huge stone balls turned into huge fireballs that drew death arcs in the air and smashed into the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's battle formation. The dense battle formation was simply a paradise for fireballs. A fireball smashed down and caused a large number of casualties. Countless soldiers were splashed by the flames. Their bodies were set on fire, and they screamed and fled in all directions. Wherever the fireballs rolled, the soldiers fled. The number of fireballs in the sky was simply uncountable. At this moment, the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's army was immediately thrown into chaos and couldn't form a battle formation at all. With the help of the 3 bow, 8 bull bed crossbows and the catapults, the southern army had lost more than 15,000 soldiers on the first day of the fierce attack. However, they hadn't even touched the city wall of Mulan Fortress. This time, both Yang Xiuqing and Li Xiuqing were greatly shocked. Such a fortress was not something that could be conquered by human power. Just when Bai Qi thought that the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's army would retreat, the next day, the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom launched another fierce attack on Mulan Fortress. It seemed that they wouldn't stop until they achieved their goal. Faced with the super powerful firepower of Mulan Fortress, the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's secret weapon had to appear in advance. As the army moved forward, 5 cannons appeared in the battle formation. These cannons were Hong Xiuqiuan's secret weapon. Hong Xiuqiuan's uprising happened in the late Qing dynasty. The use of firearms had become extremely widespread. Therefore, when Hong Xiuqiuan appeared in the wilderness, he automatically obtained the Ming Dynasty Firearms Manufacturing Technical Manual. Unfortunately, the manufacturing of firearms had extremely high requirements for both materials and craftsmanship, and the failure rate was extremely high. Moreover, most firearms had limited power and couldn't be used in a large-scale army. The reason why Hong Xiuqiuan was determined to attack Mulan Fortress was that he wanted to conquer Lianzhou County, then obtain a port, build warships, and install cannons to realize his ambition. The power of the 5 cannons was indeed extraordinary. Faced with the impenetrable walls of Mulan Fortress, the cannons smashed many large holes on the walls. If the situation continued like this, Mulan Fortress might really be penetrated by the cannons. Unfortunately, there were only 5 cannons and their shooting range was short. They had to rely on the cover of the army, braving the dense firepower of the ballistae and catapults to advance to the edge of the walls before they could fire. For a moment, both sides suffered heavy losses. The walls of Milan Fortress were heavily damaged, and the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's army also suffered heavy losses. Even a precious cannon was smashed by a catapult and destroyed on the spot. A day passed, and Milan Fortress was finally safe and sound. That night, Bai Qi ordered the Lianzhou County Garrison Division to immediately enter Milan Fortress to assist in its defense. The Taiping Southern Army didn't have it easy either. After one day, they lost more than 10,000 soldiers. If they continued fighting like this, the Southern Army would probably collapse before Milan Fortress was breached. That night, Yang Xiuqing sent a letter to Hong Xiuquan, asking him to withdraw. She suggested that they change their strategic position and move to the North Sichuan province. Unfortunately, Hong Xiuquan rejected Yang Xiuqing's suggestion. This was also the first time that the two of them disagreed with each other. After all, Yang Xiuqing's status in the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom was second only to Hong Xiuquan. To be continued. Chapter 509. Fort Milan suddenly became the focus of the southwest battlefield. Since Hong Xiuquan insisted on fighting, Yang Xiuqing naturally had to carry it out to the end. No matter how great the sacrifice was, for now, Hong Xiuquan's will in the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom was unquestionable. While the southern army of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom was attacking the Milan Fortress, the Leopard Army Corps led by Han Xian had already received an order from the military administration to rush all the way to reinforce the fortress. Because they had been delayed at the command center for 2 days, even if the Leopard Tau army was forced to march, they could only reach the Milan Fortress before the 28th. Thus, the defenders led by Bai Qi had to resist the enemy's fierce attacks for at least 2 days. Apart from that, Wuzhou County had just been conquered and had yet to be officially ruled by the Mountain Sea Territory. Therefore, the logistics of the Leopard Tau Corps still had to rely on Zhaoqing County to be in charge of the transportation. It could be said that Han Xian's decision to attack Fort Milan was a risky one. Fortunately, Han Xian was an opportunist to begin with. He knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. When the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom attacked the Milan Fortress, they focused all their attention on the front line. Once the Leopard Tau army attacked them from the back, they might be defeated immediately. In order to win, Han Xian was willing to take this risk. As for the 1st Regiment of the Dragonxiang Legion, led by Jiang Kai, they were still slowly advancing in the 100,000 mountain range and would not be able to make it in time for the battle. In view of the current situation in Qiyu City, Ouyang Shua didn't dare to transfer the Imperial Guard Regiment away for the time being. To suppress all of Wuzhou County with the strength of a division, Ouyang Shua was already trembling with fear as if he was walking on thin ice. After leaving the courtyard, Ouyang Shua sent an order to Lin Yi, telling him to lead 2 brigades and an independent division of the mountain barbarians out of Qiyu City, sweeping through the local forces in Wuzhou County. The mountain barbarian tribes of Wuzhou County were numerous, numbering in the hundreds. More than 60% of the tribes had settled down in Qiyu City. The remaining 40% would become local tyrants. On the day that Ouyang Shua arrived at Qiyu City, he had asked Wang Feng to personally lead a team of 100 people and go around the city to make public announcements to pacify the people and declare the rule of Shanghai City. According to Wang Feng's secret letter, there were some places that blocked the divine martial guard from entering the city. Towards these insensible barbarians, Ouyang Shua naturally had to display the thunderous methods of a king. He could also use this opportunity to wipe out all the stubborn local powers of Wuzhou County in one fell swoop. To clear the obstacles for Fan Zhongyan to take over Wuzhou County, the Black Snake Guard, including the military intelligence, had never given up on infiltrating the various prefectures and counties of Wuzhou. With the cooperation of the 2 intelligence agencies, Lin Yi's thunderous operation would definitely be successful. When the Black Snake Guard sent a secret letter saying that there were less than 40,000 soldiers stationed in Tianjin, Ouyang Shua had indeed thought of leading the Imperial Guard Division and the 4 Mountain Barbarian Independent Divisions to attack Tianjin and destroy the nest of Tianping Kingdom in one fell swoop. To be honest, the idea was tempting. After careful consideration, Ouyang Shua gave up on this tempting idea for 3 reasons. Firstly, Tianjin City was not a pushover. Hong Xiuquan had reincarnated, so how could he not be diligent in managing his own nest? According to the response of the Black Snake Guards, Tianjin City's city walls, including its defensive facilities, were top-notch in the wilderness. According to the classification, it was already half a level higher than a county city, between a county city and a capital city. Moreover, if Hong Xiuquan was given a little more time, he could really build Tianjin into a capital city. Thus, without the help of siege weapons, taking down Tianjin City was truly a delusion. Not to mention anything else, Ouyang Shua was certain that Hong Xiuquan must have set up cannons on the city walls. Cannons might not be very good for attacking a city, but they were really great weapons for defending a city. The cannons looked down from a high vantage point, and with the protection of the battlements, they could really kill gods and Buddhas in their way. Its power and lethality were even more terrifying than the 3-bow, 8-bull bed crossbow. With just the Mountain Barbarian Independent Division that he had just subdued, Ouyang Shua really did not have the confidence to take down this tough bone. Secondly, Xuanzhou County was not some back garden. Hong Xiuquan's rule over the people was based on the organization of religion as the core of his rule. Thus, in Xuanzhou County, whether it was officials or commoners, they were all believers of Taiping. Ouyang Shua believed that once he led his troops into Xuanzhou County, no matter how careful he was, his army would be exposed in front of Hong Xiuquan in less than half a day. There would be nowhere to hide. Thus, a surprise attack was simply impossible. Hong Xiuquan's rule over the people was truly like an iron bucket. All the commoners of Tianping Kingdom were his believers and also his spies. No movement could be hidden from Hong Xiuquan. In comparison, Chio's rule was only cruel and domineering. Thirdly, Wuzhou County was still not stable. Ouyang Shua's rule was not stable. Apart from the factor of Chiyu City mentioned earlier, as well as the constraints of the local powers. More importantly, he had to guard against the South Xiang city-state to the north of Wuzhou County. After the Battle of Zhaoqing, all the neighbors of Shanghai City had long realized one thing. If they did not want to be annexed by Shanghai City, just relying on passive defense was far from enough. They had to be vigilant at all times. When necessary, they even had to take the initiative to attack, using offense as defense. Otherwise, at any time, Shanghai City could boil frogs in warm water and wipe them out one by one. Moreover, the leader of the South Xiang city-state, south of Rosy Clouds, was not a simple person. This person had been quiet until the Battle of Giant Deer, only revealing his sharpness. Moreover, once he appeared, he was unstoppable, with the attitude of shocking the world with a single brilliant feat. The South Xiang city-state could be established in a short period of time. Apart from the objective factor of the threat of Shanghai City, the prestige of south of Rosy Clouds and the alliance was also a main reason. In comparison, the Siege Lion and the Dragon-Seeking Acupoint were both inferior. Anyone like this was basically an extremely shrewd person. Ouyang Shua did not think that after the South Xiang city-state was established, it would be a well-behaved baby. At the crucial moment, south of Rosy Clouds had the courage to fight with Shanghai City. Thus, Ouyang Shua did not dare to easily loosen his control over Wuzhou County. According to the intelligence from the Black Snake Guards, south of Rosy Clouds and Ruanping had been meeting frequently recently. The two of them had probably reached a tacit understanding and formed an alliance of interests, preparing to fight against Shanghai City together. Thus, the situation of Shanghai City in the north and east was really not optimistic. If they want to take another step forward and expand their territory again, it would be even more difficult. At this time, how could Ouyang Shua take the risk and attack Tianjin rashly? With Ouyang Shua's personality, he preferred to fight steadily and surely. As long as the Han Xian Corps arrived in time and defeated the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's Southern Army, the two armies of Shanghai City could join forces and conquer Xuanzhou County with absolute strength. Stability was the goal that Ouyang Shuo had set. As long as he stabilized himself, Shanghai City would be in an invincible position. And if he was impulsive and chose to take the risk, it was very likely that the enemy would turn the tables. The biggest difference between Ouyang Shuo and Di Chun and the others was that his foundation was not deep enough. Whether it was Di Chun, Lord Chun Shin, Wolf Warrior, Xiongba, or even the almost fallen military killer, no matter how they fought against Ouyang Shuo and suffered setbacks, they were always able to turn the tables again and again, quickly recover their strength, and even improve. What do they rely on? They relied on the foundation of the aristocratic families. But Ouyang Shuo was different. Although he relied on the advantage of his rebirth, he was constantly increasing the foundation of his territory. Reaching this step was already a crucial moment. If he suffered a heavy blow, he might not be able to climb back up. Why? Because Ouyang Shuo's personal foundation was insufficient. In a one-on-one fight, how could he be a match for the aristocratic families? What Ouyang Shuo could do was to use the advantage of his rebirth and the characteristics of his territory to continuously unearth historical talents. At the same time, he spared no effort to cultivate the native talents of his territory to fight against the aristocratic families. Therefore, Ouyang Shuo could not make any mistakes. If he did, what awaited him would probably be a bottomless abyss. There is a strange phenomenon in the China region that Ouyang Shuo had only recently realized. That was, according to the comparison of his previous life, the territory of Di Chun and the others was actually stronger than in his previous life. Why? It was precisely because of Ouyang Shuo's pressure that Di Chun and the others rapidly grew up. Ouyang Shuo's role in the China region was actually that of a spoiler. It was just that this spoiler was too outstanding. He had beaten Di Chun and the other aristocratic families' juniors to wake up in advance. This phenomenon was similar to the catfish effect. Ouyang Shuo was the catfish in the pond. When Ouyang Shuo realized this problem, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. October 26th, the third day of the war. The Southern Army of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom was ready to fight with all their strength. Nearly 200,000 soldiers were dispatched. Naturally, the most eye-catching were the 4 cannons. Learning from yesterday's lesson, Yang Xiuqing ordered people to build a protective cover for the 4 cannons overnight to prevent them from being hit by the fireballs of the catapults and being destroyed on the spot. Cannons were indeed powerful, but they were somewhat exquisite. Other than cannons, the Southern Army's second trump card was the hundreds of mobile arrow towers. In order to avoid being completely suppressed by the ballistae of Mulan Fortress, the Southern Army had to fight for the high ground. This time, it would be a confrontation between the archers of both sides. Other than that, the frontline troops of the Southern Army were all saber and shield troops. Yang Xiuqing's goal was very clear. He did not expect to break through the Mulan Fort, which was like a natural moat, within a day. He did not expect to attack the city walls and engage the Shanghai City Army in a melee battle. Yang Xiuqing's goal was to ensure that the cannons could concentrate their firepower and destroy a section of the city wall to create an opportunity for tomorrow's attack. Apart from that, they also had to destroy the ballistae and catapults on the city walls. If they didn't get rid of these things, the Southern Army wouldn't be able to attack the city walls. Yang Xiuqing was born in a poor family. His family farmed the mountains and burned charcoal for a living. But personally, he was truly talented and had extraordinary wisdom. Whether it was in politics or military affairs, he had performed well. To be continued. Chapter 515. If Han Xian was an assassin, then Bai Qi was a brilliant swordsman. Seeing that the Taiping army was being attacked from behind by Leopard Tao's army, they were thrown into disarray. Bai Qi naturally wouldn't remain indifferent. He immediately ordered the 3rd Division, the 4th Division, and the 5th Division of the Dragon Xiang army to join the battle. In this way, the Taiping army would face a pincer attack. Yang Xiuqing, Lin Fengxiang, and Chen Yuqing, the three generals, wanted to organize the army to form a battle formation to resist the enemy. Unfortunately, it happened so suddenly that their efforts had little effect. Although the soldiers of the Taiping army had been tempered for a year and were no longer pushovers, they were still not fearless in the face of danger. In the face of the general trend, they couldn't do anything at all. The timing Han Xin chose was too fatal. It was the time when the Taiping army was the most exhausted and the most relaxed. The soldiers were already thinking about having a hearty meal at night after they retreated. They didn't expect that they would suddenly face a test of life and death at this time. Fate was so cruel. It often gave you a fatal blow when you were caught off guard. The large-scale defeat of the Taiping army was right in front of them. The sunset glow in the sky became more and more gorgeous. Half of the sky was dyed red. The battle in the wilderness didn't stop at all as the night approached. Every man on the battlefield was facing a test of life and death. Tens of thousands of soldiers of the Taiping army were making their last struggle. The deafening battle cries reverberated in the vast wilderness and did not dissipate for a long time. They reverberated on the mottled city walls, causing waves of echoes. On the battlefield, there were soldiers falling at every moment, falling into pools of blood, falling under the sunset. The orange-red sunset glow was dyed with the most gorgeous color at this moment. It was the color of life. This was the unique sunset glow that appeared in the eyes of the soldiers at the last moment before they fell. There was also a hint of warmth in the gorgeous glow. The red sun hanging in the sky finally couldn't bear to watch anymore and slowly fell into the sky. Night had finally fallen, and the sky was actually filled with a few stars that were rarely seen. The battle in the wilderness was finally coming to an end. The battle cries were getting weaker and weaker. Outside the wilderness, there was already a sea of blood. The war horses were neighing, and smoke was filling the air. More than 100,000 soldiers of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom were finally defeated by the two armies of Shanghai City. The generals and soldiers either fought or fled. Seeing that there was no hope of victory, some soldiers chose to surrender. Most of the officers and soldiers of the Taiping army were refugees. Summoned by Heavenly King Hong Xiuquan, they joined the army in order to survive. Therefore, they valued their lives more than anyone else. Rows of soldiers surrendered, wave after wave. The soldiers put down their weapons and stood alone on the bloody battlefield. They were helpless and hesitant. Even the sound of weapons falling to the ground was so ear-piercing. This was the mourning sound of a kingdom turning from prosperity to decline. The Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, at its most glorious moment, was about to hit rock bottom because of this defeat. After the battle, less than a tenth of the 200,000 soldiers who were full of ambition remained. Just when the battle was at its most disadvantageous, Yang Xiuqing and the other generals finally gave up their final struggle and led their elite troops to break out of the encirclement. Unfortunately, neither Bai Qi nor Han Xin were prepared to let the tiger return to the mountain. The most elite cavalry troops of the two legions were immediately sent out to encircle and suppress the fleeing enemy troops. It was also because of the aggressive encirclement army and the escape of their commanding general that the soldiers of the Taiping army surrendered in despair. In the vast night, they certainly could not outrun the pursuing cavalry troops. Instead of that, they might as well choose to live an ignoble life. After all, no one really cherished their lives. It was not until late at night that this huge pursuit came to an end. Faced with the pursuit of the two legions, the three generals of the Taiping army also faced different fates. Lin Fengxiang led his troops and attempted to break out of the encirclement from the southwest, but they were besieged by Xiao Bu's division. His troops suffered heavy losses. In the end, Lin Fengxiang died bravely in battle. The rest of his troops could only choose to surrender. Chen Yuqing led his troops to break out of the encirclement from the northwest, but they were pursued by Sun Quanlin's division. Chen Yuqing, a famous general, was shot down by Sun Quanlin's arrow and captured helplessly. Seeing that their commanding general was captured, his troops could only choose to surrender in the end. The only one who escaped the disaster was Yang Xiuqing. It was Mu Ging, a female general, who was in charge of pursuing Yang Xiuqing. Under Bai Qi's instruction, Yang Xiuqing luckily escaped in the chaos. In order to cover for Yang Xiuqing, her troops suffered heavy losses. In the end, only about 3,000 soldiers escaped with Yang Xiuqing. According to the post-battle statistics in the life-and-death battle that took place in the evening, except for the 3,000 soldiers who followed Yang Xiuqing and a few who were lucky enough to escape into the forest at night, the rest of the soldiers were either killed in battle or surrendered. The southern army of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom vanished into thin air. With the annihilation of the southern army, one of the pillars of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom also collapsed. How far could the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom go with a broken leg? Everything was still unknown. The most crucial battle in the southwest came to an end. In the vast night, Yang Xiuqing led the remnants of her troops and fled in a panic. It was not until they ran for more than 40 miles and could no longer see the pursuers that they stopped to rest with a little peace of mind. The soldiers silently took out their dry rations and cooking utensils and began to cook. The other soldiers, on the other hand, instinctively went to collect firewood or to fetch water from the kettle. There were also some soldiers who dragged their tired bodies to stand guard around the area. The whole team was terribly silent. Under the starlight, their numb and frightened faces could be seen. Their chief commander, Yang Xiuqing, didn't look well. His face was tense, as if it could explode at any time. After a simple meal and seeing that it was already late at night, the team decided to rest on the spot. They would set off again the next day. After personally inspecting the patrolling troops, Yang Xiuqing dragged his exhausted body into the temporary tent to rest. Unfortunately, what had happened during the day kept replaying in his mind. He couldn't fall asleep at all. Phew! Yang Xiuqing got up. Outside the tent, it was already pitch black. Only the twinkling stars could be seen. Yang Xiuqing put on his coat and walked out of the tent. He looked up at the sky, a myriad of thoughts running through his mind. Somehow, the starry sky above his head seemed to be giving him a hint, making his thoughts clearer. A gust of night wind blew over, bringing with it waves of coldness. Yang Xiuqing subconsciously pulled his cloak. At this moment, Yang Xiuqing thought of many things. There was Hong Xiuquan, the Heavenly King, and the fate of the entire Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. This defeat made Yang Xiuqing realize that the Heavenly Kingdom seemed powerful, but in fact, it was like a castle piled up with sand on the beach. A big wave could crush it into pieces. Thinking of this, Yang Xiuqing felt even more miserable. He was the one who sent the Heavenly Kingdom to its doom. In the dark night, Yang Xiuqing's body, which was not tall and straight, looked extremely lonely and helpless. "What are you thinking about, General?" Suddenly, a low voice came from behind Yang Xiuqing. "Who's there?" After all, Yang Xiuqing had been in the army for many years, so he still had the necessary vigilance. With a swish, the long sword at his waist had already been unsheathed, shining coldly. He turned his head and saw that it was an ordinary soldier who looked a little unfamiliar. "Whose subordinate are you? Why don't you stay in the camp?" Yang Xiuqing's words were full of anger. He couldn't tolerate his subordinates being unruly. "General." At this moment, the sound of Yang Xiuqing unsheathing his sword alarmed the patrolling soldiers, who were rushing over. "General, do you know that your death is near?" The ordinary soldier didn't have the slightest trace of panic on his face, but what he said made Yang Xiuqing's heart beat faster, and a trace of coldness flashed in his eyes. "I'm fine. You guys continue to patrol." Yang Xiuqing frowned. He first sent the patrolling soldiers away, then turned his head to look at the strange soldier, and said in a low voice, "Follow me." With that, he got up and walked toward the tent. The soldier silently followed behind. Inside the tent, Yang Xiuqing suddenly turned around, his eyes suddenly became extremely sharp, and his killing intent was pressing. He stared at the soldier and said word by word, "Speak. Who are you?" "Who I am is actually not important. What's important is that I can help fight you, General." "Humph, shameless boasting. So, General actually knows that you are about to face the situation that you are about to face, right? Yang Xiuqing was speechless. He wasn't a fool. How could he not know how difficult the situation he was about to face would be? Thinking of the Heavenly King's cold eyes, Yang Xiuqing shuddered. Given the Heavenly King's suspicion of General has suffered a great defeat this time and suffered heavy losses. Given the nature of the Heavenly King, do you still think that you can get away with it? The ordinary soldier's words were not polite at all, and he exposed Yang Xiuqing's predicament blatantly. Hearing that, Yang Xiuqing's face became darker and darker, and he pursed his lips tightly, remaining silent. At this moment, the soldier suddenly changed the topic and said, General must be wondering why the Heavenly King is so afraid of you. You know? Hearing that, Yang Xiuqing's eyes suddenly opened wide, and even his tone was a little shaky. This question was the biggest knot in Yang Xiuqing's heart. He only promised that after entering the wilderness, whether it was to be to the Heavenly King or to the Heavenly Kingdom, he would be loyal and devoted. He did not expect that he would be suspected by the Lord for no reason. This feeling was really not good. Yang Xiuqing was a sensitive person, and every time he met with the Heavenly King, he would feel that there was a pair of eyes looking at him from behind. This kind of feeling was really creepy. However, on this night, a strange soldier revealed the biggest mystery in Yang Xiuqing's heart. How could he not be shocked? The entire air was filled with the smell of conspiracy. Just a little. The soldier nodded and said, If General trusts me, I am willing to tell you one by one. Speak. Yang Xiuqing was also not an ordinary person, and he calmed his mind and waited with rapt attention. To be continued. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.